I hired a cleaning lady while my wife was away. An hour later, she called me, whispering, "Sir, is anyone else supposed to be in the house?" Confused, I asked, "What do you mean?" She said, "Something is wrong here. There is a man drilling in your office." I shouted, "Get out now," and called the police. But when I arrived home, the man in handcuffs was not a stranger. It was the person I was supposed to trust most in this world. My name is Lester Freeman. I am 68 years old, and for 40 years I served as the chief building inspector for this city. I know structures. I know that a house stands or falls based on its foundation, and if the foundation is rotten, it does not matter how fresh the paint looks on the walls. I spent my life ensuring buildings were safe for families, but I failed to inspect the structural integrity of my own family. I never imagined that the termites eating away at my life would be the people sitting at my dinner table. Before I tell you how I dismantled their entire scheme, please let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Hit like and subscribe if you have ever had to protect what is yours from ungrateful relatives. I was on the 9th hole at the country club when the call came from Rosa. I dropped my club and drove my Lincoln Town car 80 miles per hour down the interstate. My hands were gripping the steering wheel so tight my knuckles turned the color of ash. My wife Corinne was in Atlanta caring for her sick sister. The house should have been empty. I had specifically hired Rosa because she was discreet and thorough. Her terrified whisper was still ringing in my ears as I screeched into my driveway. The scene that greeted me was a nightmare for any homeowner in a quiet, respectable suburb. 3 squad cars blocked my driveway. Blue and red lights flashed against the pristine white siding of the colonial house I had purchased 20 years ago. The neighbors were standing on their lawns with their phones out recording everything. I felt a surge of humiliation heat up my neck. I had worked hard to be a pillar of this community. A black man in this neighborhood had to be twice as respectable to get half the credit, and now my home looked like a crime scene. I slammed the car door and ran toward the porch. 2 officers were dragging a man out the front door. He was kicking and screaming. When the porch light hit his face, I stopped dead in my tracks. It was Gavin, my son-in-law. Gavin is a venture capitalist, or at least that is what he tells people at cocktail parties. He wears Italian suits and drives a leased Porsche, but I always saw the way he looked at my property. He looked at my home not as a place of memories, but as a line item on a balance sheet. Now he was pinned against the hood of a police cruiser, his face red with rage. "Get your hands off me," he screamed at the officer. "Do you know who I am?" "This is my father-in-law's house. I have permission to be here." The officer looked at me. "Sir, do you know this man?" I walked up to Gavin. He smelled of sweat and drywall dust. His eyes were wide, not with fear, but with a strange, desperate arrogance. I looked at the officer and said, "I know him, but I did not give him permission to be here. Why was he drilling in my office?" Gavin laughed a nervous, frantic laugh. "Dad, tell them. Tell them you asked me to come over and fix the plumbing in the master bath. You called me yesterday, remember? You said the sink was leaking." I stared at him. I had never called him. My plumbing was copper and perfectly maintained. I maintained my own house. I did not need a man who had never held a wrench in his life to fix my sink. "Liar," I said. My voice was low and steady. "I never called you." Before Gavin could respond, a silver Mercedes SUV pulled up to the curb. My daughter Tasha jumped out. She was still wearing her scrubs from the dental clinic. She ran past the police tape, ducking under the line, and threw herself at the officer holding Gavin. "Let him go," she screamed. "That is my husband. What are you doing to him?" She turned to me and her eyes were full of tears. "Dad, what is wrong with you? Why did you call the police on Gavin? He was doing you a favor." I looked at my daughter. Tasha was my only child. I had paid for her college, her dental school, and her wedding. I loved her more than life itself, but in that moment she looked at me like I was the enemy. "He broke into my house, Tasha," I said. Rosa heard him drilling. He was not fixing a sink. Tasha grabbed Gavin's arm as the officer released his grip slightly. "Dad, you are confused. Gavin told me this morning that you called him. He said you sounded worried about a leak. You probably forgot. You have been forgetting things lately." The accusation hit me harder than a physical blow. "You have been forgetting things lately." It was a seed planted in public in front of the police and my neighbors. I saw the shift in the officer's eyes. He looked from the angry young white man in the suit to the crying daughter, and then to the old black man standing alone. The narrative was shifting right before my eyes. I was no longer the victim of a break-in. I was the confused elderly man who made a mistake. "I am not senile, Tasha," I said sharply. "I know what I did and did not do." Gavin rubbed his wrists where the handcuffs had been. "Officer, I do not want to press charges for false arrest. He is my father-in-law. He has been under a lot of stress since my mother-in-law left for Atlanta. We just want to make sure he is safe." The audacity took my breath away. He was forgiving me for his crime. The police officer sighed and closed his notebook. "Sir, if this man is family and your daughter confirms he had a reason to be here, this is a civil matter. We cannot arrest him for breaking and entering if he has implied consent from a family member. But he lied," I insisted. "There is no leak." Tasha stepped between me and the officer. "Dad, stop it. Just stop it. You are embarrassing us. Look at the neighbors." She pointed to the street. Mrs. Higgins from next door was live streaming the whole thing. I felt my shoulders sag. Tasha knew exactly where to hit me. She knew my pride was my armor and she had just pierced it. The police officer tipped his hat. "Have a good evening, folks. Try to resolve this indoors." As the squad cars pulled away, the silence that descended on the lawn was heavy and suffocating. Gavin adjusted his suit jacket and brushed the dust off his lapel. The fear was gone from his eyes, replaced by a smug, cold look that sent a shiver down my spine. "Let's go inside, Dad," Tasha said, her voice softer now, but still patronizing. "I will make you some tea. You look shaken." I did not say a word. I turned and walked into my house, my sanctuary. But as I crossed the threshold, it did not feel like my home anymore. It felt like a battlefield. Tasha went to the kitchen. I could hear her filling the kettle. Gavin sat on my leather sofa, the one I had imported from Italy, and put his feet up on the coffee table. He looked at me and smiled. "That was a close one, Dad," he said. "You really should check your memory. I have the call log on my phone." I ignored him. I walked straight past him down the hallway to my home office. This was my domain. The walls were lined with framed certifications and photos of skyscrapers I had inspected. My mahogany desk was exactly as I left it, clean, organized, but the air felt disturbed. I walked over to the large oil painting of the Chicago skyline that hung behind my desk. To anyone else, it looked normal, but I had hung that painting myself using a laser level. I knew its exact placement relative to the crown molding. It was shifted. I leaned in closer. My eyes are old, but they are sharp. The dust line on the wallpaper revealed the truth. The frame had been moved exactly 2 millimeters to the right. I reached out and tilted the frame. Behind the painting was my wall safe. It was a high-security model rated for fire and burglary. I ran my fingers over the digital keypad. It was warm. Someone had been trying combinations. I looked down at the floor. The carpet was dark blue, so it hid dirt well, but I saw it, a fine layer of white dust, gypsum dust, the same dust I had smelled on Gavin's suit. He had not just been trying to guess the code. He had been drilling. I knelt down and ran my hand along the side of the safe where it met the drywall. There it was, a tiny hole no bigger than a needlepoint drilled expertly into the side of the locking mechanism. He was trying to bypass the solenoid. This was not a plumbing repair. This was not a misunderstanding, and he was not using a regular drill. He had used a diamond-tipped bit, the kind used by locksmiths or professional thieves. My heart began to hammer against my ribs. Gavin was not just a greedy son-in-law. He was desperate, and he had skills I did not know about. I stood up and brushed the dust from my knees. I heard Tasha laughing in the kitchen. She was laughing with the man who had just tried to rob her father. I realized then that the police were useless. Tasha was compromised. I was completely alone in a house with two predators. One was a wolf, and the other was a sheep who had fallen in love with the wolf. I walked back into the living room. Tasha held out a mug of tea. "Chamomile, Dad," she said. "It will help you calm down." I took the mug. My hand did not shake. I looked at Gavin, who was scrolling through his phone. "You are right," I said. My voice was calm, terrifyingly calm. I must have forgotten. "Thank you for coming to check on the plumbing, Gavin." Gavin looked up, surprised by my surrender. He smirked. "No problem, Dad. That is what family is for." I sipped the tea. It tasted bitter. But my mind was clear. I knew exactly what I had to do. They wanted to play games with a man who built skyscrapers. They forgot that before you build up, you have to dig deep. and I was about to dig a hole so deep they would never climb out of it. I smiled at them, a real, genuine smile, because I knew something they did not. The safe in the office was a decoy. The real documents were somewhere they would never find. But now I knew they were hunting, and the hunting season had just begun. Dinner that night was a masterclass in tension. The only sound in the dining room was the scrape of silver forks against fine china. I sat at the head of the table in the same chair I had occupied for 30 years. Tasha sat to my right picking at her roasted chicken. Gavin sat to my left eating with an appetite that turned my stomach. He cut his meat with precise aggressive strokes as if he were dissecting a problem he had already solved. I looked at him. He was wearing one of my casual polo shirts because the police had dusted his suit for evidence. Seeing him in my clothes made my skin crawl. It felt like a violation, like he was trying on my life to see if it fit. Tasha kept glancing between us, her eyes red from crying. She wanted everything to be normal. She wanted us to talk about the weather or the neighbors, but I was not interested in small talk. I was interested in the truth. I put my fork down. It made a sharp clatter that made Tasha jump. "Gavin," I said. My voice was steady but low. "You said you were fixing a leak in the master bath." Gavin chewed slowly and swallowed. He took a sip of water before answering. "That is right, Dad." The faucet was dripping. "You know how water bills can spike." I leaned forward. "The master bath is on the second floor. My office is on the first floor directly below it. But the plumbing lines run through the interior wall, not the exterior wall where my safe is located. If you were fixing a leak, why was there drywall dust on your shoes? And why did Rosa hear a drill?" Tasha dropped her fork. "Dad, please." "Not again. We just got the police to leave." I did not look at her. I kept my eyes locked on Gavin. "Plumbing does not require a diamond-tipped drill bit, Gavin. That is for masonry or hardened steel, like a safe." Gavin sighed. He looked at Tasha with a weary expression as if to say, "See what I have to deal with." He reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. He tapped the screen a few times and then slid it across the mahogany table toward me. "Look at the date, Dad," he said gently. "Look at the message." I looked down at the screen. It was a text message thread between Gavin and me. The most recent message was dated yesterday at 2:30 in the afternoon. It was sent from my number. The text read, "Hey Gavin, the faucet in the master bath is acting up again. Could you swing by tomorrow while I am at the club and take a look? Code is still the same. Thanks." I stared at the words. They were clear. They were undeniable. And they were a complete fabrication. I had never written that text. I had never sent that message. My hands began to tremble not from age, but from a cold fury rising in my chest. "I did not send this," I said. Tasha reached across the table and covered my hand with hers. Her palm was warm, but her words were ice cold. "Dad, it is right there. It is from your number." "It is a trick," I said, pulling my hand away. He could have spoofed the number, or he could have sent it when I was not looking. Gavin shook his head sadly. "Dad, why would I do that? Why would I fake a text about a leaky faucet? I came here because you asked me to. I know it is hard to admit when you forget things." My grandmother was the same way. She would swear she turned the stove off right before the kitchen caught fire. The comparison hit its mark. Tasha looked at me with a new kind of fear. It was not fear of Gavin, it was fear for me. She was looking at her father, the man who taught her how to ride a bike and solve calculus problems, and seeing a senile old man who was losing his grip on reality. "Dad," Tasha whispered, "you left the garage door open last week. You forgot to pay the gardener on Tuesday. And now this. Maybe Gavin is right. Maybe you are taking on too much by yourself." I looked at my daughter. She was rewriting history right in front of me. I had not left the garage door open, the sensor was broken, and I was waiting for a part. I had not forgotten the gardener, he had come on the wrong day. But Tasha was stringing these isolated incidents together into a narrative of decline. "I am not your grandmother," I snapped. "My mind is sharp. I can recite the building codes for this entire state from memory." "Do not look at me with pity, Tasha. Look at him with suspicion." Gavin stood up. He walked around the table and put his hands on Tasha's shoulders. He massaged her neck gently, looking at me with a mask of concern. "We are not attacking you, Dad," Gavin said. "We love you. We just want to make sure you are safe. Maybe Tasha is right. Maybe living alone in this big house is too much for you right now, especially with Corinne away. You get confused. You get paranoid. Paranoid, that was the word they wanted. If I was paranoid, then my accusations about the safe were just delusions. If I was confused, then the police report was invalid. Gavin was building a cage around me, not with bars, but with gaslighting. He was using my own daughter as the lock. I stood up abruptly. My chair scraped loudly against the floor. I am done eating, I said. I will be in my office. Do not disturb me. I walked out of the dining room. I could hear Tasha sobbing softly behind me. I heard Gavin whispering to her, telling her it was going to be okay, telling her they would get me the help I needed. It took every ounce of my self-control not to turn around and break his jaw. But violence would only prove his point. If I attacked him, I was the crazy old man. If I stayed silent, I was the confused old man. I needed to be neither. I needed to be the inspector. I entered my office and locked the door. I did not turn on the main light. I turned on the desk lamp, creating a small pool of yellow light in the darkness. I sat down and took deep breaths, forcing my heart rate to slow. Panic is the enemy of precision. That is what I used to tell the junior inspectors when a building was swaying in the wind. You trust the math, not the fear. I pulled my smartphone from my pocket. Gavin had shown me the text message on his phone, but he forgot that communication is a two-way street. I unlocked my phone and went to the messages. There it was. The sent message. Hey, Gavin. Hey. The faucet in the master bath is acting up again. It was there in blue and white. To anyone else, this would be proof that I was losing my mind. I had sent it and forgotten it. But I did not just rely on what was on the screen. I relied on logistics. I opened the details of the message. Sent yesterday at 2:30 p.m. 2:30 p.m. I closed my eyes and replayed yesterday in my mind. Where was I at 2:30? I was not at the club. I was not napping. I opened my laptop and logged into my Verizon account. I have been a creature of habit for 40 years, but I'm also a man who trusts data over memory. When I was a city inspector, developers would often try to claim I approved permits I never saw. They would bribe secretaries to forge my signature. So I learned to keep my own records. I recorded every site visit, every conversation, and every movement. I navigated to the data usage logs. I cross-referenced the timestamp. The message was indeed sent from my device. The data packet originated from the cell tower nearest to my home. But at 2:30 yesterday, I was in the backyard. I was cleaning the grill, getting ready for the weekend barbecue that never happened. My phone was not in my pocket. I had left it on the kitchen counter because I did not want to get grease on the screen. And who was in the kitchen at 2:30? I accessed the security camera archives. My security system is old but reliable. It records to a local hard drive in the basement. I pulled up the kitchen feed from yesterday. I watched the grainy footage. I saw myself walk out the back door with a wire brush in my hand. The phone was sitting on the granite island next to the fruit bowl. 2 minutes later, Gavin walked into the frame. He had come over yesterday to drop off some paperwork for Tasha. In the video, he looked around to make sure the room was empty. He walked over to the counter. He did not pick up the phone immediately. He used a napkin to pick it up so he would not leave fingerprints on the screen. I watched as he unlocked my phone. He knew the passcode. Tasha must have given it to him, or he had watched me type it in. He typed quickly. Then he deleted the message from the recent thread view, but he forgot that the carrier log never lies. He sent the message to himself to create the alibi. Then he put the phone back exactly where I left it. He looked at the camera. For a split second, he looked right at the lens. He smiled. It was a small, tight smile. He knew the camera was there. He just did not care. Or maybe he thought he would have the hard drive erased by the time anyone looked. I sat back in my chair. The air in the room felt colder. This was not an impulsive act of greed. This was not a desperate man seizing a sudden opportunity. This was premeditated. He had been planning this for weeks, perhaps months. He had planted the seeds of my senility. He had manufactured the evidence. He had turned my daughter against me. The enemy was not at the gate. The enemy had been sleeping in the guest room, eating at my table and driving my car. I looked at the screen again. The text message was not just an excuse to enter the house. It was the first nail in my coffin. They were not just trying to rob me. They were trying to erase me. I picked up a pen and a notepad. I wrote down the date and the time of the video footage. Then I wrote down one name, Big Al. I needed help. I needed someone who operated outside the law because the law had just walked out of my house and left me with the criminals. I was not losing my mind. I was being hunted, and it was time for the prey to show its teeth. The next 3 days were a blur of calculated chaos. My home is built on a foundation of order because that is how I have lived my entire life. Everything has a place. The keys go in the ceramic bowl by the door. The remote control sits parallel to the edge of the coffee table. The thermostat is set to 72 degrees, but suddenly my house began to rebel against me. It started with small things. I would place my reading glasses on the nightstand before bed and wake up to find them in the bathroom sink. I would leave the milk in the refrigerator and find it sitting on the counter, sour and warm hours later. I knew I had not done these things. I am a creature of habit. I have followed the same routine since 1985. But when you are alone in a large house and objects begin to migrate, it creates a sliver of doubt in your mind. The psychological warfare escalated on Tuesday. I woke up freezing. The house was like an icebox. I walked to the hallway thermostat. It was set to 60 degrees. I adjusted it back to 72. An hour later, it was back at 60. I checked the wiring. It was perfect. I checked the programming. It was cleared. Someone was messing with the settings manually, but I was the only one home. Or at least I thought I was. Then came the real blow. I went to my filing cabinet to check my life insurance policy. It is a substantial policy, one I took out 20 years ago to ensure Tasha would be cared for if anything happened to me. It is worth $2 million. The cabinet was locked, but when I opened the drawer, the folder was gone. I felt a cold sweat break out on my forehead. That folder contained not just the policy, but the deed to the house and my will. I frantically began to pull other files out. My tax returns were shuffled. My medical records were out of chronological order. Someone had been here. Someone had been sifting through the paper trail of my life. I was on my knees, surrounded by piles of documents when the front door opened. "Dad, are you here?" It was Tasha. Of course it was Tasha. Her timing was too perfect to be accidental. I stood up, but I must have looked like a madman. My hair was uncombed. I was wearing my bathrobe over my clothes because the house was freezing. And I was standing in the middle of a storm of paper. Tasha walked into the office and stopped. Her hand went to her mouth. "Oh my God, Dad," she whispered. "What are you doing?" "I was looking for my insurance policy," I said. My voice was breathless. "It is gone, Tasha. Someone took it. And the thermostat keeps changing." Tasha looked at the thermostat. "Dad, it says 72 degrees. It is perfectly warm in here." I looked. The digital display glowed a bright, steady 72. Someone had changed it back just before she arrived. "No," I said. "No, it was 60 degrees 5 minutes ago." "I am not crazy, Tasha. Gavin has a key. He is coming in here. He is moving things." Tasha walked over to me. She did not hug me. She stepped over my tax returns like they were trash. She looked at me with an expression that cut deeper than any knife. It was pity, pure condescending pity. "Dad, Gavin is at work," she said slowly, as if speaking to a child. "He has been at the office since 7 this morning. I tracked his location. He has not been here." She was lying or she was being fooled, but in that moment it did not matter. She pulled out her phone. "Who are you calling?" I asked. "I am calling Dr. Evans," Tasha said. "We need to get you an appointment. This is getting out of hand, Dad. First you accuse Gavin of burglary, and now you are tearing the house apart because of a thermostat. You are hallucinating. Put the phone away, Tasha." I warned her. She ignored me. She pressed the speaker button. I heard the ringtone echo in the silent room. "Dr. Evans' office. How may I help you?" "Hi, this is Tasha Freeman Brock. I am calling about my father, Lester. Yes, it is an emergency. He is having an episode. He is extremely agitated and paranoid. I think his condition is progressing faster than we thought." I stood there frozen. My own daughter was diagnosing me over the phone in my own house. I wanted to scream. I wanted to shake her and tell her that her husband was a thief and a gaslighter. But I saw the way she looked at me. If I screamed, she would tell the doctor I was violent. If I grabbed the phone, she would tell the police I was abusive. I was trapped. The more I fought, the deeper I sank into their quicksand. I sat down in my chair and folded my hands. I became the inspector again. I shut down my emotions. I let her make the appointment. I let her clean up the papers. I let her kiss me on the forehead and tell me to get some rest. But as soon as her car pulled out of the driveway, I went to the hardware store. I was done with keys. Keys can be copied. Keys can be stolen. I bought the most expensive biometric deadbolt on the market. It required a fingerprint and a unique code that I generated on a standalone device. I spent the afternoon installing it on the back door, the front door, and the door to my bedroom. I felt a surge of satisfaction as I programmed the lock. Gavin could not fake my fingerprint. He could not charm his way past a solid steel bolt. That night, I locked my bedroom door. I heard the mechanical whir of the deadbolt sliding into place. For the first time in 3 days, I felt safe. I slept deeply, believing that my fortress was secure. I woke up to the sound of birds chirping. The morning sun was streaming through the curtains. I stretched, feeling rested. I turned over to fluff my pillow and my hand brushed against something smooth and stiff. It was paper. My heart stopped. I sat up slowly. Lying right next to my head on the pillow where I slept was a glossy brochure. The cover featured a smiling elderly couple sitting in wheelchairs watching a sunset. The text in bold gold letters read, "Paradise Gardens Assisted Living and Memory Care." I picked it up with trembling fingers. It was not just a brochure. Inside was an application form. My name, Lester Freeman, was already typed into the applicant field. The reason for admission was checked as advanced dementia and inability to self-care. I looked at the bedroom door. The biometric lock was still engaged. The green light indicated it was secure. I scrambled out of bed and ran to the door. I examined the mechanism. There were no scratches, no signs of forced entry. Then I saw it. A thin layer of residue on the fingerprint scanner. It looked like silicone. Gavin. He had lifted my fingerprint. It is a trick I had seen in spy movies, but I never thought a venture capitalist would know how to do it. He had come into my room while I was sleeping. He had stood over me while I was vulnerable and unconscious. He could have killed me. He could have suffocated me with a pillow. But he did not want me dead. Not yet. He wanted me to know that he could touch me whenever he wanted. He wanted me to know that no lock could keep him out. He left the brochure as a message. It was a promise. You are going here. I looked at the application again. At the bottom, under the signature line for the legal guardian, was a signature that made my blood run cold. It was not Tasha's signature. It was Gavin's. He was already positioning himself as my guardian. He was going to lock me away in a facility, drug me into a stupor, and sell everything I had built. I crumbled the brochure in my fist. The fear evaporated. In its place came a cold, hard resolve. He thought he was playing a game with a senile old man. He thought he had won because he bypassed a lock. But he had made a fatal error. He had entered my bedroom. He had violated my personal space. And in doing so, he had crossed the line from a civil dispute to a war for survival. I did not call Tasha. I did not call the police. I walked to my closet and pulled out a shoebox from the top shelf. Inside was a burner phone and a card with a number I had not called in 10 years. I dialed. "Big Al," I said when the gravelly voice answered. "Lester, is that you? You sound like you have seen a ghost." "Worse, Al," I said. "I have seen a demon. I need eyes, Al. I need eyes that do not blink." I hung up. Gavin wanted to watch me. Fine. I was about to turn the lights on, and when the lights came on, the cockroaches would have nowhere to hide. I drove my Lincoln to the industrial district on the south side of the city where the warehouses block out the sun and the streets are paved with cracked asphalt. I had not been to this part of town in 20 years, not since I was a rookie inspector checking permits for questionable factories. I pulled up in front of a faded brick building with a sign that read, "Al's Electronics and Surplus." The windows were barred and the door was heavy steel. I checked my rearview mirror to make sure I had not been followed. The paranoia was no longer a symptom, it was a survival tactic. I walked inside. The air smelled of solder and stale cigarette smoke. Big Al was sitting behind the counter tinkering with a circuit board. He was a massive man with hands the size of shovels and a mind sharper than a razor. He had been a detective in the Vice Squad back when the city was rougher, and he knew every trick in the book. "Lester," he grunted without looking up, "you look like you have been sleeping with one eye open." "I have not been sleeping at all, Al," I said. I told him everything. I told him about the safe, the drill, the gaslighting, and the digital lock that had been compromised. Al listened in silence, his eyes narrowing with every detail. When I finished, he put down his soldering iron and looked at me. "Your son-in-law is smart," Al said. "He is using modern tech against you. Wi-Fi jammers, signal interceptors, silicone fingerprint lifts. If you buy a camera from a big box store, he will hack it in 5 minutes. He will loop the footage and rob you blind while you watch a video of an empty room." "So what do?" I asked. Al stood up and walked to the back of the shop. He came back with a cardboard box that looked like it had been sitting there since the 90s. He blew the dust off the top. "You go analog," Al said. "No Wi-Fi, no Bluetooth, no cloud storage. This is a closed-circuit hardwired system. The cameras are the size of a pinhead. The feed runs through shielded copper wire directly to a physical DVR. Unless he has X-ray vision and a pair of wire cutters, he cannot hack this because it does not exist on the internet." I opened the box. It was heavy. It felt real. "I need 4 cameras," I said, "and a microphone that can pick up a whisper from across the room." Al nodded. "I will throw in a high-gain audio amplifier. But Lester, you have to install this yourself. I cannot send a crew. If he sees a van, he will know." "I can handle it," I said. "I know the bones of my house better than the man who built it." I paid Al in cash. No credit card trail. I shook his hand and his grip was iron. "Watch your back, Lester," he said. "Men who smile while they rob you are the dangerous kind. They do not have a conscience, they only have an appetite." I drove home with the equipment hidden in a reusable grocery bag buried under apples and bags of pasta. Tasha was in the kitchen when I arrived. She looked at the grocery bag and smiled a tight, pitying smile. "Good to see you eating, Dad," she said. "Gavin is coming over for dinner again tonight. He wants to smooth things over." I forced myself to smile back. "That sounds nice," I said. "I will be in the basement for a while. I want to organize my old tools." "Perfect," she said. "Just stay out of trouble." I went down to the basement and locked the door. My house has a secret that even Tasha does not know about. Behind the water heater there is a false panel that leads to a utility chase. It is a narrow vertical tunnel that runs from the foundation to the attic, carrying the main plumbing stacks and electrical conduits. When I built this house, I made the chase wide enough for a man to climb. I changed into my old coveralls. I took the wire spool and the cameras. I squeezed into the chase. It was dark and smelled of dry wood and dust. I felt a strange sense of calm. This was my element. I was not a confused old man here. I was the inspector. I climbed the ladder rungs I had installed years ago, moving silently through the veins of my own home. I started with the office. I found a vent near the ceiling. I drilled a microscopic hole through the metal grating and fed the lens through. It was invisible to the naked eye. I ran the wire down the chase, taping it to the back of a PVC pipe so it would look like a grounding wire. Next was the living room. I hid the camera inside the housing of the smoke detector. I wired it directly into the house power so it would never run out of battery. Then the kitchen. I placed the camera high up on top of the kitchen cabinets, aiming down at the island where they liked to talk. Finally, I installed the microphone in the hallway chandelier. The wiring was tricky, but my hands were steady. I felt like a surgeon performing a life-saving operation on a dying patient. I ran all the wires back down to the basement into a hidden compartment under the workbench. I connected them to the DVR box Al had given me. I connected a small monitor. I flipped the switch. 4 grainy black and white images flickered to life. The resolution was not high definition, but it was honest. I saw Tasha in the kitchen chopping vegetables. I saw the empty office. I saw the living room. I was live. I had eyes that did not blink. I had ears that did not sleep. I climbed out of the chase, cleaned the dust off my face, and changed back into my clothes. I went upstairs and played the role of the tired father. I ate dinner with Gavin and Tasha. I listened to Gavin talk about his imaginary business deals. I watched him pour wine and laugh. He looked at me with that same smug arrogance. He thought I was beaten. He thought I was just an old dog waiting to be put down. He had no idea that beneath his feet a tape was rolling, recording every lie that left his mouth. I went to bed early at 9 o'clock. I locked my biometric door, knowing it was useless, but keeping up the charade. I waited until the house was silent. At midnight, I heard Tasha leave. She kissed Gavin goodbye and drove back to her apartment. Gavin stayed. He told Tasha he wanted to stay in the guest room to keep an eye on me in case I had another episode. I waited. 1 hour. 2 hours. At 1:30 in the morning, I slipped out of bed. I did not turn on any lights. I moved by memory, counting my steps to the basement door. I went down to my workbench and opened the hidden compartment. The monitor bathed my face in a pale gray glow. I put on the headphones. The house was quiet for 20 minutes. Then at 2:14 in the morning, I saw movement on camera 2. The front door opened. Gavin walked in. He was fully dressed in his suit, but he was not alone. Behind him walked a tall, thin man carrying a laser measuring device and a tablet. He looked sleek and predatory, like a shark in a tailored suit. I turned up the audio gain. The static hissed in my ears, and then their voices came through clear and cold. "Keep your voice down," Gavin whispered. "The old man is asleep upstairs, but he is a light sleeper." The stranger nodded and looked around the living room. He did not look at the decor. He looked at the structure. He walked to the wall and tapped it. "Solid," the stranger said. "Plaster over lath. Good insulation. High ceilings. This is pre-war quality construction, Gavin. You do not see this anymore." He walked into the dining room, scanning the perimeter with his laser. "What is the square footage?" the stranger asked. 4,200, Gavin answered instantly, plus a finished basement and a 3-car garage. The lot is double the standard size for this zip code. The stranger whistled softly. He tapped on his tablet. "The market is hot right now, Gavin," the stranger said. "Inventory is low. A place like this, with this kind of bone structure, it will incite a bidding war. Developers will want the land, but a flipper could make a killing just by updating the kitchen and bathrooms." "I do not care about the flippers," Gavin said, his voice tight with urgency. "I need a cash buyer. I need a quick close. No inspections, no contingencies." The stranger stopped measuring. He turned to look at Gavin. "Cash buyers want a discount, Gavin. If you want to bypass the market and close in 10 days, you are going to take a hit on the price." I watched Gavin pace back and forth in the living room. He ran his hands through his hair. He looked like a man standing on the edge of a cliff. "Just give me a number," Gavin hissed. The stranger tapped his tablet again. 2.5 million. Cash. As is. I gasped softly. The house was worth 3.5 easily. Gavin was willing to lose $1 million just for speed. 2.5, Gavin repeated. He sounded relieved. 2.5 clears the debt. The stranger smirked. "It clears the principal, Gavin. But the interest is ticking. The sharks do not like waiting. You told them you had the asset secured. You told them the old man was signing the power of attorney this week." "He is," Gavin snapped. "He is losing it. I have him convinced he is senile. I have Tasha convinced he is dangerous. One more incident, one more public outburst, and the judge will grant emergency guardianship. I will have the signature by Friday." The stranger laughed, a dry, humorless sound. "You are a cold bastard, Gavin. He is your father-in-law. He is an obstacle," Gavin said, staring up at the ceiling right at the floorboards of my bedroom. "He is just a placeholder. The house belongs to the future, not the past. Just get the paperwork ready. Once I have the guardianship, we sell immediately. I pay the sharks and I walk away with a clean slate." "And the old man?" the stranger asked. "What happens to him when the sharks take the house?" Gavin shrugged. "Paradise Gardens has a bed waiting for him. The state pays for it once his assets are liquidated. He will not know the difference. He will be too medicated to care." I took the headphones off. My hands were shaking, but this time it was not fear. It was rage. Pure distilled rage. The sharks. Gavin was in debt to loan sharks. He was not just a bad investor, he was a gambler involved with organized crime. He was going to sell 40 years of my hard work for pennies on the dollar to save his own skin. He was going to drug me, throw me in a state facility, and erase my legacy just to pay off a gambling debt. I looked at the record light on the DVR. It was blinking steady in red. I had him. I had the confession. I had the motive. But a recording was not enough. If I went to the police now, Gavin would claim it was hypothetical. He would claim he was just getting an appraisal. He would claim I doctored the tape. The law is slow and Gavin was slippery. No, I needed more. I needed him to commit the act. I needed to catch him not just planning the crime, but executing it. I looked at the monitor one last time. Gavin was shaking hands with the stranger. They were sealing the deal on my grave while I was still breathing. I turned off the monitor. I sat in the dark basement and listened to the silence of my house. "You want a quick sale, Gavin?" I whispered to the darkness. "You want to clear your debt?" I stood up. "I will give you a sale. I will give you a show you will never forget. But the price is going to be higher than you can imagine. The price is going to be everything you have." The morning sun did not bring warmth, it only brought clarity. I sat in my car outside the Hall of Records, holding a cup of black coffee that had gone cold. I knew what Gavin was planning, but I needed to understand why. A man does not sell his in-law's house for pennies on the dollar unless he is running from something terrifying. I walked into the building where I had spent half my career. The smell of floor wax and old paper was comforting. I bypassed the main line and went straight to the office of Sarah Jenkins. She was a clerk I had hired 20 years ago, and she knew how to find a needle in a haystack of bureaucracy. "Lester," she said, surprised to see me. "You look like you are on a mission." "I am Sarah," I said. "I need you to pull everything you can on Gavin Brock. Start with his business licenses and then check for liens." Sarah typed quickly, her fingers dancing over the keyboard, her brow furrowed. "Lester," she said quietly, "there are no business licenses. Brock Ventures LLC was dissolved 2 years ago for failure to pay taxes." I nodded. I suspected as much. "Keep digging, Sarah. Check the civil court records." She hit enter and the printer began to whine. It did not stop for a long time. I picked up the stack of papers. It was an autopsy of a financial disaster. Gavin was not a venture capitalist. He was a gambler. But he did not bet on horses, he bet on cryptocurrency and high-risk derivatives. The records showed 3 lawsuits for unpaid debts totaling over $200,000, but those were just the legal ones. Then I saw the UCC filings. These are public notices when a creditor claims an interest in a debtor's property. There were filings from companies with vague names like Apex Holdings and Red Star Capital. I knew these names. They were shell companies for loan sharks. They charged interest rates that made credit card companies look like charities. I did the math in my head. Gavin owed nearly $800,000. The interest was compounding daily. The $2.5 million he wanted for my house was not for investment. It was to stop these men from breaking his legs. He was drowning. And like a drowning man, he was ready to climb on top of me and push me under just to catch a breath. I thanked Sarah and walked out. The papers in my hand were heavy. They were proof that my daughter was married to a fraud. But they were also proof that he was dangerous. A desperate man is capable of anything. I drove home, taking the long way. I needed to think. If I showed these papers to Tasha, would she believe me? Or would she say I forged them? Would she say I was confused again? Gavin had her wrapped so tightly around his finger she could not breathe without his permission. My phone rang as I pulled into the driveway. It was Tasha. "Dad," she said. Her voice was thick with tears. "Tasha, what is wrong?" I asked, feigning ignorance. "It is Gavin," she sobbed. "He is in trouble, Dad. His company. The market crashed this morning. He leveraged everything on a deal and it fell through. He's going to lose everything. The investors are going to sue him. They might even arrest him." I sat in my car and listened to the lie. There was no deal. There were no investors. Just thugs who wanted their money. Gavin was feeding her a script. "He needs help." "Dad," Tasha continued, "he needs a bridge loan just for a month until the market corrects itself." "How much, Tasha?" I asked, my voice flat. "He needs $800,000, she whispered. The number matched perfectly. He was not even trying to hide it anymore. "We do not have that kind of cash, Tasha," I said. "I know," she said. "But the house, Dad, the house is paid off. We could take out a home equity line of credit. Gavin said he can process the paperwork in 24 hours. He knows a banker. A banker. Or a shark in a suit." "Tasha," I said firmly, "I am not mortgaging my home. This is the house your mother and I built. It is our security." "Dad, please," Tasha screamed. "Do you want to see your daughter on the street? Do you want to see Gavin go to jail? Mom would do it. Mom would help us. Why are you being so selfish?" The mention of her mother made my jaw tighten. Corinne would give the shirt off her back, but she was not a fool. "Your mother is not here, Tasha," I said. "And the answer is no. I will not sign anything. Tell Gavin to solve his own problems." There was a silence on the line. I could hear Tasha breathing raggedly. Then I heard a shuffling sound. The phone was being passed. When the voice spoke again, it was not Tasha. It was Gavin. "Listen to me, old man," he said. His voice was unrecognizable. The charm was gone. The respectful son-in-law act was gone. This was the voice of the man I had seen on the hidden camera. It was cold, metallic, and dead. "You are making a mistake," Gavin said. "Tasha is crying her eyes out right now. Do you enjoy hurting your daughter?" "I am protecting her from you, Gavin," I said. "I know about the debts. I know about the shell companies. I know you are broke." Gavin laughed. It was a dry, scratching sound. "You think you know everything because you pulled a few public records. You have no idea who you are dealing with, Lester. These people do not sue. They collect. And if I cannot pay them, they get angry." "That sounds like your problem," I said. "It is a family problem now," Gavin hissed. "Because if I go down, Tasha goes down with me. And you are all alone in that big empty house. Is that a threat, Gavin? I asked. I am just stating facts, he said. You are 68 years old. You have poor balance. You have a bad memory. Accidents happen to people living alone all the time. They fall down stairs. They leave the gas on. They have heart attacks. My hand gripped the phone so tight I thought the screen would crack. Are you threatening to kill me? I asked. Gavin lowered his voice to a whisper. I am saying that if you do not sign those papers by Friday, you might not make it to the weekend. Think about it, Lester. Is a pile of bricks and wood worth your life? He hung up. I stared at the phone. The screen went black. He had said it. He had crossed the line from fraud to murder. He was not just a thief. He was a killer in waiting. I looked at my house. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the lawn. It looked peaceful, but inside I knew the war had begun. Friday. I had until Friday. That was 3 days away. I put the car in gear and drove into the garage. I did not feel fear. I felt a strange, cold clarity. Gavin thought I was prey. He thought he was the wolf. But he forgot one thing. I was the one who built the forest, and I knew where all the traps were. I walked into the kitchen and opened the drawer where I kept my heart medication. I looked at the bottle. Then I looked at the hidden camera I had installed above the cabinets. If he wanted an accident, I would give him one. But it would not be the accident he was expecting. The doorbell rang at 7 in the evening. It was raining hard, a cold, driving rain that lashed against the windows like gravel. I checked the monitor in the basement before I went upstairs. It was Tasha. She was alone, standing on the porch with a large Tupperware container in her hands. She looked small and defeated, her shoulders hunched against the wind. I unlocked the door. Tasha did not hug me. She just walked into the foyer, dripping water onto the hardwood floor. Her eyes were swollen and red-rimmed. She looked like the little girl who used to come to me when she scraped her knee, expecting me to fix the pain with a bandage and a kiss. I brought you dinner, Dad, she whispered. Cream of mushroom soup. I know it is your favorite. I made it from scratch. I looked at the container. Steam was pressing against the lid. My stomach growled. I had not eaten a proper meal since the incident with the safe. I had been living on coffee and adrenaline. Thank you, Tasha, I said. I took the container. It was warm. She followed me into the kitchen. I set the soup on the counter and got a bowl. Tasha sat on a stool watching me. She looked nervous, twisting her wedding ring round and round her finger. I am sorry about the phone call, Dad, she said. Her voice was trembling. Gavin is just... He is under so much pressure. He did not mean what he said. He loves you. We both love you. We are just scared of losing everything. I poured the soup into the bowl. The smell was rich and earthy, but there was something else underneath it. A faint metallic tang that I attributed to the heavy amount of black pepper Tasha always used. I looked at my daughter. I wanted to believe her. I wanted to believe that the man who threatened my life was a stranger to her. I wanted to believe that she was a victim of his manipulation, not a partner in his crimes. I picked up the spoon. My instincts shouted at me to pour it down the sink. My brain screamed that this was a trap, but my heart was a traitor. This was my child. This was the girl I had carried on my shoulders. If I refused her food, I was declaring war not just on Gavin, but on her. I was confirming her fear that I was paranoid. I took a spoonful. It was hot and creamy. It is good, Tasha, I said. She smiled. A genuine relief washed over her face. Eat it all, Dad. You look so thin. I ate. I ate because I wanted to bridge the gap between us. I ate because I wanted to prove that I still trusted her even if I did not trust her husband. I finished the bowl and wiped my mouth. Thank you, baby, I said. Tasha stood up and kissed my cheek. Her lips were cold. I have to go, Dad, she said. Gavin is waiting in the car. He did not want to come in and upset you. I watched her leave. I locked the door behind her. I felt a heavy sadness settle in my chest. I went to the living room and sat in my armchair intending to read a book. 10 minutes passed, then 20. The first sign was the heat. A sudden wave of intense heat washed over me, starting from my stomach and radiating out to my fingertips. I loosened my collar. I thought maybe the soup was just too hot. Then the walls began to breathe. I looked at the patterned wallpaper. The floral design seemed to be shifting, crawling like insects under the surface. I blinked hard, but the image did not correct itself. My vision blurred at the edges, narrowing into a tunnel. I tried to stand up. My legs felt like they were made of lead. My knees buckled and I fell back into the chair. What is happening? I whispered. My tongue felt thick and heavy in my mouth like a piece of dry leather. I looked at the clock. The numbers were dancing. Poison. The realization hit me with the force of a sledgehammer. The metallic taste. The nervousness. Gavin waiting in the car. They did not just want me to sign papers. They wanted me incapacitated. Or worse. Gavin's voice echoed in my memory. Accidents happen to people living alone all the time. I had to get to the phone. I reached for the landline on the side table. My hand missed the receiver by 3 inches. My depth perception was gone. I swiped again, knocking the lamp to the floor. The crash sounded like an explosion in my sensitive ears. I needed to purge. I needed to get this out of my system. I forced myself to stand. I grabbed the back of the chair for support. The room tilted violently to the left. I felt like I was standing on the deck of a ship in a hurricane. I took a step and stumbled, crashing into the wall. The bathroom. I had to get to the upstairs bathroom. I needed privacy. If I passed out down here and they came back, they would finish the job. I had to get behind the biometric lock of my bedroom. I dragged myself to the staircase. The stairs looked impossibly steep. They stretched up into the darkness like a mountain. I grabbed the banister. It felt slippery. My hands were sweating profusely. I took the first step. My foot didn't lift high enough. I tripped, slamming my shin against the wood. Pain shot up my leg, but it felt distant, like it was happening to someone else. I crawled. I abandoned dignity and crawled on my hands and knees. 1 step, 2 steps. The hallway light above me began to spin. It turned into a blinding white sun. I heard voices, whispers. I heard Gavin laughing. I heard Tasha crying, "Eat it all, Dad." I was halfway up when my right arm gave out. I collapsed onto the stairs. I began to slide backward. "No," I groaned. I dug my fingers into the carpet runner. I kicked out with my legs. I stopped my slide. I lay there panting, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. I could feel the darkness closing in around the edges of my mind, seducing me. It told me to sleep. It told me to just let go. It would be so easy to close my eyes and drift away. If I slept, I died. I bit my tongue. I bit down hard until I tasted copper blood. The sharp pain cut through the fog. "Move, Lester," I commanded myself. "Move!" I pulled myself up the last few steps. I crawled across the landing. The bedroom door was miles away. I reached it. I punched in the code. My fingers were numb. I got it wrong. Try again. Focus. I punched it in. The light turned green. I fell inside and kicked the door shut. The deadbolt slid home. I dragged myself into the master bathroom. I pulled myself up to the toilet. I shoved my fingers down my throat. Nothing happened. My gag reflex was paralyzed. I tried again, deeper. I scratched my throat. I forced my body to reject the poison. Finally, my stomach convulsed. A violent spasm racked my frame. I heaved. Once, twice. The soup came up burning and acidic. I vomited until there was nothing left but bile. I vomited until I was dry, heaving, gasping for air on the cold tile floor. I lay there for a long time. The spinning slowed down. The heat began to dissipate, replaced by a bone-chilling cold. I curled into a fetal position on the bath mat. I was shaking uncontrollably. I looked at the vomit in the toilet bowl. It was evidence. I reached up and grabbed a plastic sample cup from the cabinet, the kind I used for my annual physicals. With trembling hands, I scooped a sample and sealed the lid. Then I flushed the rest. I washed my face with freezing cold water. I looked in the mirror. The man staring back at me was gray. His eyes were bloodshot. He looked like a ghost, but he was alive. I did not sleep in the bed. I slept in the bathtub with the shower curtain drawn, holding a baseball bat across my chest. I waited for the sound of the door breaking down. I waited for Gavin to come finish what he started. But no one came. They thought the job was done. They were waiting for the phone call from the police in the morning, finding the old man dead at the bottom of the stairs. I woke up when the sun hit the bathroom tiles. My body ached as if I had been beaten with iron rods. My head throbbed with a chemical hangover that made light painful. I put the sample cup in a Ziploc bag. I got dressed, moving slowly. I did not go to the hospital. Hospitals report to next of kin. Tasha was next of kin. I drove to a private toxicology lab in the city center. It was run by Dr. Aris, a man I had helped with a zoning permit years ago. He owed me a favor. "I need this analyzed, Aris," I said, handing him the bag. "Rush it, and off the books." He looked at me, and then at the bag. He did not ask questions. He knew the look of a man in trouble. "Wait here," he said. I sat in the waiting room for an hour. I drank 4 cups of water to flush my kidneys. I watched the clock on the wall. It was not dancing anymore. Dr. Arris came out holding a piece of paper. His face was grim. "Lester, what did you eat?" he asked. "Soup," I said. "Why?" He handed me the paper. "We found high concentrations of scopolamine and a powerful benzodiazepine," he said. "This cocktail is often called devil's breath in South America. It renders the victim compliant, docile, and confused before knocking them out completely. In the dosage you ingested, it causes severe hallucinations, loss of motor control, and eventually respiratory failure." He looked me in the eye. "This was not accidental, Lester. This is enough to kill a horse. If you hadn't purged, you would be in the morgue right now." I took the paper. I stared at the chemical names. Scopolamine, the drug that makes people do whatever they are told. The drug that makes them sign papers they do not remember signing. And Tasha brought it to me. I walked out of the lab and into the bright sunlight. The city noise was deafening, but inside my head there was only silence. My daughter. My little girl. Did she know? The question tore at my soul. Did she sprinkle the powder into the soup while Gavin drove the car? Or did Gavin hand her the container and say, "Here, take this to your dad, it has extra vitamins"? I thought about her nervousness. I thought about how she watched me eat. Eat it all, Dad. If she knew she was a monster, if she did not know she was a weapon. Either way, Gavin had turned my own flesh and blood into an instrument of murder. He had used her love and my trust to try and stop my heart. I sat in my car and looked at the toxicology report. This was not just fraud anymore. This was attempted homicide. I took out my phone. I had a missed call from Tasha. "Dad, call me when you wake up. I was worried about you." I did not call back. I started the engine. "You wanted to sedate me, Gavin," I said to the empty car. "You wanted me docile." I put the car in gear. "You just woke up the only thing in this world that can destroy you." The summons did not come by mail. It came by a process server who banged on my door at 7 in the morning 2 days after the poisoning. I was still weak. My hands still trembled when I tried to hold a coffee cup. I opened the door, and a man in a cheap windbreaker shoved a stack of papers into my chest. He said, "You have been served," and walked away without looking me in the eye. I took the papers into the kitchen. The header at the top of the page made my knees buckle. It read, "Emergency petition for temporary guardianship and conservatorship." The petitioner was Gavin Brock. The CO petitioner was Tasha Freeman Brock. I sat down and read the document. It was a masterpiece of fiction woven around grains of truth. It claimed that I, Lester Freeman, was suffering from rapid onset dementia. It claimed that I was a danger to myself and others. It cited the police visit where I accused my son-in-law of burglary. It cited the incident with the thermostat. And most damning of all, it cited a psychotic episode that occurred 2 nights ago where I hallucinated and fell down the stairs. They were not just trying to put me in a home. They were trying to strip me of my civil rights. A guardianship meant I could not access my bank accounts. I could not hire a lawyer. I could not even choose where to sleep. I would become a child in the eyes of the law, and Gavin would be my parent. The hearing was scheduled for 10 o'clock that same morning. This is how they do it. They file for an emergency ex parte hearing, giving the victim no time to prepare, no time to gather evidence, and no time to clear the drugs from their system. It was a legal ambush. I dressed slowly. I put on my best suit. It hung loosely on my frame because I had lost 5 pounds in 2 days. I tied my tie with shaking fingers. I looked in the mirror. I looked old. I looked tired. I looked exactly like the man they described in the paperwork. But my eyes were clear. The poison was gone from my blood, even if the weakness remained in my muscles. I grabbed my briefcase. I did not bring the toxicology report. I did not bring the hidden camera footage. Not yet. If I revealed my hand now, the judge might just delay the ruling. I needed Gavin to feel completely secure. I needed him to think he had won, so he would lead me to the final evidence. The courtroom was small and smelled of floor wax and stale coffee. It was not a place of high drama. It was a place of bureaucratic processing. The judge looked bored. He had probably heard 10 cases like mine already this week. Elderly parents losing their minds, children stepping in to take control. It was a routine tragedy. Gavin and Tasha were already sitting at the plaintiff's table. Gavin wore a navy blue suit that screamed respectability. Tasha sat next to him looking at her hands. She did not look at me when I walked in. She looked like a ghost. I sat alone at the defendant's table. I had no lawyer. There was no time to get one. The proceedings began. Gavin's lawyer, a slick man with a voice like oiled leather, stood up. He painted a picture of a loving family desperate to save their patriarch from his own deteriorating mind. He spoke of my confusion, my paranoia, my violent outbursts. Then came the evidence. Your Honor, the lawyer said, we have video documentation of Mr. Freeman's condition. This was recorded by Mr. Brock 2 nights ago when the family attempted to have a peaceful dinner. Gavin stood up and connected his tablet to the courtroom monitor. He pressed play. I watched the screen. I saw myself, but I did not see the man I knew. I saw a figure stumbling in the living room. I saw myself clawing at the walls. I heard my own voice slurring and shouting about the walls breathing. I saw myself crawling up the stairs, dragging my legs like a wounded animal. The video cut off right before I made it to the bedroom. It did not show the vomiting. It did not show the recovery. It only showed the madness. The courtroom was silent. I could feel the eyes of the judge on me. They were heavy with pity. Then Gavin called his witness. A man I had never met walked to the stand, Dr. Lawrence. He claimed to be a geriatric specialist who had reviewed the footage and my medical history provided by Tasha. In my professional opinion, Dr. Lawrence stated, looking at the judge, Mr. Freeman exhibits classic signs of Lewy body dementia, the hallucinations, the paranoia, the motor control issues. It is a rapid decline. He is not safe living alone. He requires 24-hour supervision in a secure facility. Gavin sat there with a look of pure concern on his face. He dabbed his eye with a handkerchief. It was a performance worthy of an Academy Award. He was stealing my life, and he was making the court thank him for it. I looked at Tasha. She was crying silently. She believed it. She watched that video, and she believed her father was gone. She did not know she was the one who poisoned me. Gavin had weaponized her love and turned it into the bars of my cage. The judge turned to me, Mr. Freeman, do you have anything to say? Do you have any evidence to refute these claims? I stood up. My legs were steady now. I walked to the center of the room. I looked at the judge. I looked at the doctor who had diagnosed me without ever shaking my hand. And then I looked at Gavin. If I fought, I would lose. If I screamed, I would prove them right. If I showed the toxicology report now, they would claim I took the drugs myself in a confusion. I had to lose the battle to win the war. Your Honor, I said. My voice was raspy but clear. I watched that video. I see a man who is struggling. I see a man who fell down the stairs. I paused. I saw Gavin tense up. He was waiting for the fight. He was waiting for me to shout about poison and hidden cameras. But I am tired. Your Honor, I continued softly. I have been fighting to maintain my house, my routine, and my dignity. Perhaps my family is right. Perhaps I should not be alone right now. The courtroom let out a collective breath. The judge looked relieved. He did not want a complicated trial. He wanted a solution. Mr. Freeman, are you consenting to the guardianship? The judge asked. I am consenting to a temporary placement, I said, choosing my words with the precision of an architect. I will go to Paradise Gardens for an evaluation period. I will allow my son-in-law to manage the property during my absence. Gavin's eyes widened. He had not expected this. He expected resistance. He expected the old man to rage. My surrender confused him, but then I saw the greed take over. He realized that I was handing him the keys. He was getting exactly what he wanted without a fight. Thank you, Mr. Freeman, the judge said. I am granting the emergency petition. Mr. Brock is appointed temporary guardian. Mr. Freeman, you will be transferred to the facility this afternoon. The gavel banged. It sounded like a gunshot. The hearing was over. I was no longer a free man. I was a ward of the state. Gavin walked over to me. He was smiling a predatory, victorious smile. He reached out to shake my hand. You made the right choice, Dad, he said. You are going to love Paradise Gardens. They have great activities. Tasha and I will handle everything at the house. You do not have to worry about a thing. I did not shake his hand. I leaned in close so only he could hear me. I am not doing this for me, Gavin, I whispered. I am doing this because I want you to feel safe. I want you to go into that house and feel like you own it. I want you to think no one is watching. Gavin pulled back his smile, faltering. What are you talking about, old man? You won the round, Gavin, I said. Enjoy the victory lap. But remember what I told you about structures. When you remove a load-bearing wall, the whole house comes down. I turned to Tasha. I hugged her. She felt stiff in my arms. I love you, Tasha, I said. Remember that. No matter what happens next, remember that I love you. I walked out of the courtroom. The bailiff was waiting to escort me to the transport van. I was going to a nursing home. I was going to be locked up among strangers. But as I walked down the hallway, I felt a strange sense of freedom. Gavin was going to the house tonight. He was going to bring his drills and his experts. He was going to crack that safe. And when he did, he would be performing for an audience of one. The DVR in the basement was recording. The trap was set. I was not going to prison. I was going to my command post. I just had to wait for the wolf to take the bait. Packing a suitcase for a trip you know you are never going to take is a surreal experience. I folded my shirts with mechanical precision. I packed my toothbrush and my shaving kit. I included a framed photograph of Corinne and me taken on our 40th anniversary. I wanted the bag to look authentic. I wanted Tasha to believe that her father was defeated and resigned to his fate. The house was silent as I zipped the bag shut. It was the silence of a tomb. I walked through the hallway, touching the walls one last time. I ran my hand over the wainscoting I had installed myself. I looked at the spot on the stairs where I had staged my fall. The house and I were co-conspirators now. We were both waiting for the violation that was about to occur. Tasha was waiting in the driveway. She did not come inside. She sat in her car with the engine running, avoiding looking at the front door. When I walked out, she popped the trunk. I put my suitcase inside and climbed into the passenger seat. The drive to Paradise Gardens was excruciating. Tasha tried to make small talk. She talked about the weather. She talked about how nice the facility was. She told me the nurses were very kind and the food was nutritious. She sounded like she was trying to convince herself more than me. I just nodded and looked out the window. I played the part of the medicated, confused old man perfectly. When we arrived, the facility smelled of lemon pledge and despair. A nurse with a bright, artificial smile greeted us. She took my bag. She took my arm. "We will take good care of him, Mrs. Brock," she said. Tasha turned to me. She had tears in her eyes again. "I will visit you tomorrow, Dad," she said. "I promise. We just need a few days to get everything settled." I reached into my pocket and pulled out my key ring. It held the key to the front door, the key to the garage, and the key to the back gate. It was the symbol of my authority over my domain. "Here," I said. My voice was soft. "You are the guardian now, Tasha. Take care of the house." She took the keys. Her fingers brushed mine and she flinched as if she had touched a hot stove. "I will, Dad," she whispered. I watched her walk away. I watched her get into her car and drive out of the parking lot. She was driving fast, too fast. She was rushing back to him. She was rushing back to open the gates for the barbarian. As soon as her car disappeared around the corner, my demeanor changed. I shook off the nurse's hand gently but firmly. "I need to use the restroom," I said. I walked down the hallway past the common room where elderly residents sat watching a game show. I turned the corner and pushed open the emergency exit door. I had studied the floor plan of this building online 2 days ago. I knew exactly where it led. The alarm did not sound because I had slipped a small magnet over the sensor as I passed. It was an old inspector's trick. I was outside in the rear parking lot. I pulled my burner phone from my pocket and dialed the number of a private car service I had arranged in advance. The black sedan was waiting around the corner. "Take me back," I said to the driver, "and drop me a block away from the address." The ride back was silent. I watched the city pass by. I was a ghost returning to haunt his own life. I got out of the car a street away from my house. I cut through Mrs. Higgins' yard, ducking behind her prize-winning hydrangeas. I approached my property from the rear, bordering the dense woodland that separated our suburb from the nature preserve. My house was built in 1955. It was built by a man who was terrified of nuclear war. When I bought the place 20 years ago, the real estate agent thought the backyard shed was just a storage unit for lawnmowers. But when I inspected the foundation, I found the ventilation shafts. I found the reinforced concrete cap hidden under a layer of topsoil. There was a bunker down there, a fully functional Cold War panic room accessible through a false floor in the gardening shed. I had never told Corinne. I had never told Tasha. It was my secret project. Over the years, I had restored the air filtration system, ran a dedicated power line from the main grid, and installed a hardwired connection to the house's security system. I entered the shed and pulled the hidden lever. The floorboards groaned and lifted, revealing a steel ladder descending into darkness. I climbed down. The air was cool and smelled of earth and concrete. I closed the hatch above me and engaged the internal lock. I was now buried 10 feet underground in a fortress of steel and concrete. I flipped the master switch. The bunker hummed to life. LED lights flooded the small room. Along one wall was a bank of high-definition monitors connected to the analog cameras I had installed with Big Al. I sat down in the swivel chair. I was directly beneath my own backyard. I was safe, and I was ready. I checked the time. It was 4:30 in the afternoon. I opened a bottle of water and waited. The monitors showed the empty rooms of my house. They looked peaceful in the afternoon light. The dust motes danced in the sunbeams. It was the calm before the storm. At 5:15, a black Porsche pulled into the driveway. My heart rate spiked, but my hands remained steady. I leaned closer to the screen. Gavin got out of the car. He was wearing jeans and a t-shirt. He looked like a man ready for manual labor. He walked around to the passenger side and opened the door for Tasha. Tasha stepped out. She looked pale. She was holding the keys I had given her like they were a holy relic. Gavin did not wait for her. He walked to the trunk and popped it open. He pulled out a large, heavy case. It was orange and black. I knew exactly what was in that case. It was a Hilti diamond coring drill. It was a tool designed to bore through reinforced concrete and hardened steel. It was the kind of tool you rent when you want to destroy something permanent. Tasha walked to the front door. Her hand trembled as she inserted the key. I turned up the volume on the audio feed. The lock clicked. The door swung open. Honey, Gavin said, his voice booming through my speakers. "We are home." He walked past her, not even pausing to look at the house. He marched straight into the foyer carrying the heavy drill case. He set it down on my hardwood floor with a loud thud. The sound vibrated through the speakers. He looked around. He looked at the stairs where I had fallen. He looked at the kitchen where I had been poisoned. Then he looked directly at the ceiling towards the master bedroom. "Tasha," he said, "go get the deed. It is in the safe." Tasha stood in the doorway. She looked small and lost in the house she had grown up in. "Gavin," she said, "can we just wait? Dad just left. This feels wrong." Gavin turned on her, his face twisted into a mask of impatience. "Wrong," he scoffed. "What is wrong is that we are drowning in debt, Tasha. What is wrong is that we have been waiting for this old man to die for 5 years and he is too stubborn to do it. Now stop crying and get the combination. We have a buyer coming at 8 a.m. tomorrow. That safe needs to be empty by tonight." He picked up the drill case and headed towards my office. I sat back in my chair in the bunker. I watched him walk into the trap. He thought the safe in the office was the target. He thought the wall safe behind the painting was where I kept my treasure. He was wrong. That safe was a decoy. I had installed it 10 years ago to keep petty thieves occupied. It contained nothing but expired passports and a few meaningless papers. But he was going to drill it anyway, and when he did, he was going to trigger the silent alarm I had wired into the safe's internal sensor. Not the alarm that calls the police. The alarm that locks the house down. I watched him enter the office. I saw him plug the drill into the outlet. I saw the hunger in his eyes. "Go ahead, Gavin," I whispered to the screen. "Make your move." He pulled the trigger on the drill. The high-pitched whine of the motor filled the bunker. The show had begun. The sound of a diamond-tipped drill bit biting into hardened steel is a sound you never forget. It is a high-pitched scream that vibrates in your teeth and rattles your bones. I sat in my underground bunker watching the monitor and listening to that scream tear through the silence of my home. Upstairs in the study, Gavin was leaning his entire body weight against the Hilti drill. His face was contorted with effort and greed. Sweat was dripping from his forehead, landing on the expensive Persian rug he was currently ruining with concrete dust and metal shavings. Tasha stood in the corner of the room. She had her hands over her ears. She was crying softly. She looked terrified not just of the noise but of the man holding the machine. This was not the Gavin she knew. The Gavin she knew wore suits and spoke about market trends. This Gavin was a brute force instrument. He was destroying her father's property with a violence that bordered on sexual gratification. He wanted what was inside that safe, and he did not care if he had to tear the house down brick by brick to get it. The drill bit smoked as it chewed through the first layer of the locking mechanism. The smell of burning metal filled the room. I could almost smell it through the screen. I had installed that safe myself 15 years ago. It was a good safe. It was fireproof and tamper-resistant. But no safe is designed to withstand a commercial-grade coring drill for long. I watched the sparks fly, hitting Gavin's arms. He did not flinch. He was possessed. Faster, he grunted through his clenched teeth. "Come on, you piece of junk, open up," Gavin Tasha pleaded. Her voice was barely audible over the mechanical shrieking. "Please stop, this is wrong. We can just ask him for the combination later. We are the guardians now. We do not have to do this." Gavin ignored her. He did not even look at her. To him, she was just furniture in the room, an obstacle. He pressed harder. The drill whined a pitch higher, struggling against the manganese steel plate protecting the tumblers. I watched calmly. I took a sip of water. I knew exactly what was happening inside that lock. The heat was melting the relocker pins. In about 30 seconds, the mechanism would fail. The bolts would retract, not because the code was entered, but because the integrity of the door was compromised. Gavin was sweating profusely now. His shirt was soaked through. His knuckles were white. He looked like a man digging for water in a desert. He was desperate. He needed that deed. He needed the cash he imagined was stacked inside. He needed salvation from the sharks who were undoubtedly calling his phone every hour. Suddenly there was a loud pop. It sounded like a gunshot. The drill jerked forward violently, almost throwing Gavin off balance. The metal screeching stopped. "Got you," Gavin whispered. He was panting heavily. His chest heaved up and down. He pulled the drill bit out. It was glowing red hot. He tossed the heavy machine onto my mahogany desk, scratching the finish deep. I winced. That desk was an antique, but it was collateral damage in a war I intended to win. Gavin grabbed the handle of the safe. He was trembling. This was it, the moment of truth, the moment all his scheming and poisoning and gaslighting had led to. He pulled. The heavy steel door swung open on its hinges. Gavin fell to his knees. He shoved his hands inside the dark cavity of the safe. He was expecting to feel the crisp texture of paper money. He was expecting the heavy weight of gold bars or the thick envelope of a property deed. I zoomed in with the camera. I wanted to see his face. Gavin froze. His hands stopped moving. He stayed perfectly still for 10 seconds. Then he slowly pulled his hands out. He was not holding money. He was not holding a deed. He was holding a doll. It was a rag doll about 12 inches tall. It had yarn for hair and one button eye missing. It was faded and worn from years of love. It was Tasha's favorite doll from when she was 5 years old. Her name was Miss Lucy. I had kept it in the safe all these years, not because it had monetary value, but because it was the most precious thing I owned. It was a memory of the time when my daughter looked at me with adoration instead of pity. Gavin stared at the doll. He turned it over in his hands. He looked into the empty safe again. He felt around the back. He felt the top shelf. He felt the bottom. Empty. There was nothing else. Just dust and a doll. "No," Gavin whispered. He stood up. He threw the doll across the room. It hit the wall and slid down, landing at Tasha's feet. "Where is it?" he screamed. The sound was primal. It was the roar of a wounded animal. Tasha jumped. She looked down at the doll. She recognized it immediately. She picked it up, holding it to her chest. "That is Miss Lucy," she said softly. "Dad kept her. He kept her safe all this time." "Shut up," Gavin roared. He kicked my desk. He swept the lamp off the surface, sending it crashing to the floor. "Where is the money, Tasha? Where is the deed? You said he kept everything in here. You said this was the main safe." "I do not know," Tasha stammered. She was backing away from him, clutching the doll. "He must have moved it. Maybe he took it to the bank." "Moved it," Gavin laughed. It was a manic, terrifying sound. "He is senile, Tasha. He does not know what day it is. He did not move it to a bank. He is playing games. He knew." Gavin turned his wild eyes onto Tasha. He looked at her not as his wife, but as the source of his failure. "You lied to me," Gavin hissed. He walked toward her. He stepped over the broken lamp. "You told me he was stupid. You told me he trusted you. You said the safe was full. I thought it was—" Tasha cried. "I swear, Gavin, I did not know." Gavin stopped in front of her. He was breathing hard. His eyes were wide and bloodshot. The veins in his neck were bulging. "You are useless," he spat. "You and your crazy father. You wasted my time. Do you know what happens now, Tasha? Do you know what happens when I do not pay them tomorrow?" He grabbed her by the shoulders. He shook her violently. Miss Lucy fell from her hands. "They are going to kill me," he screamed into her face. "And it is your fault. Gavin, You are hurting me, Tasha whimpered. She tried to pull away. Then it happened. The moment that broke the spell forever. Gavin pulled his hand back and struck her. It was an open-handed slap, but it carried the full weight of his rage and desperation. The sound was sickeningly loud, a sharp crack of flesh against flesh. Tasha cried out and fell backward. She hit the floor hard. She brought her hand up to her cheek. She looked up at him, her eyes wide with shock. She had never been hit before. I had never laid a hand on her. She had lived a life of protection and love. Now she was on the floor looking up at the man she had betrayed her father for. And in his eyes she saw no love. She saw only hate. "You hit me," she whispered. Her voice broke. "You hit me." "I should have done it a long time ago," Gavin sneered. "Maybe then you would have been useful. Look at you. Pathetic. Just like your father." He turned away from her. He began to pace the room again, kicking at the debris. I sat in the bunker, my hand hovering over the control panel. My finger was on the button that would lock the doors. I wanted to trap him. I wanted to go up there and tear him apart with my bare hands. But I waited. I needed the final piece. I needed the intent to destroy. Gavin stopped pacing. He looked around the room. He looked at the expensive paintings. He looked at the antique furniture. He looked at the structure of the house itself. "If I cannot sell it," he muttered to himself, "then I will burn it." He looked at Tasha, who was still on the floor weeping. "Get up," he ordered. Tasha did not move. She was in shock. "I said, get up," Gavin shouted. He did not wait for her. He turned and walked out of the room. I watched him on the hallway camera. He walked straight to the garage door. I switched the camera feed to the garage. Gavin walked to the shelf where I kept my lawn equipment. He grabbed the red jerry can. It was full of gasoline. I kept it for the snowblower. He shook it. It sloshed heavily. 5 gallons of high-octane fuel. He walked back into the house. He walked into the hallway. He began to unscrew the cap. I watched in horror. He was not just going to set a small fire. He was going to douse the house. He walked back into the study. Tasha was sitting up now, holding her cheek. She saw the gas can. She smelled the fumes instantly. "Gavin," she said, her voice trembling. "What are you doing? That is gasoline." Gavin did not look at her. He tipped the can. The pink liquid glugged out, soaking the Persian rug, splashing onto the curtains. "The insurance," he said calmly. His voice had lost the mania. It was now cold and calculated. "I bought a policy last month. Full replacement value plus contents. If the house burns down, it is worth $3 million. "Gavin, stop!" Tasha screamed. "You cannot burn the house. I am in here." Gavin continued to pour. He splashed gasoline on my desk. He splashed it on the bookshelf. "So leave," he said without looking at her. "Or stay. It does not matter to me. The policy covers accidental death too." The words hung in the air. He had just admitted it. He did not care if she lived or died. In fact, her death would just be a bonus payout. Tasha scrambled backward, crab walking away from the spreading pool of gasoline. She finally saw him. She saw the monster. "You are insane," she screamed. "You are going to kill us." "I am going to save myself," Gavin said. He finished pouring the gas in the study. He turned and walked into the hallway, trailing a line of fuel behind him. "I need a lighter," he muttered, patting his pockets. I watched him from below. The fumes were strong enough that I could almost imagine them seeping through the floorboards. He was going to light it. He was going to incinerate my home and my daughter. He found a lighter in his pocket. He flicked it. The small flame danced in the dim light. I leaned forward and spoke into the microphone. My voice was amplified by the hidden speakers in the walls. It sounded deep, booming, and godlike. "Put the lighter down, Gavin." Gavin froze. He spun around, looking for the source of the voice. The flame in his hand flickered. "Who is there?" he shouted. I pressed the button. The steel shutters on the windows slammed down with a deafening clang. The magnetic locks on the doors engaged with a heavy thud. The house was sealed. "Welcome to the inspection," I said. "And you just failed. The smell of gasoline is distinct. It is the smell of violence waiting to happen." I sat in my bunker watching the monitors, and I could almost taste the fumes that were filling the hallway above my head. Gavin walked with a terrifying calmness. He swung the red jerry can back and forth, creating a serpentine trail of fuel that led from the study through the foyer and toward the kitchen. He was painting my house with death. Tasha was scrambling on her hands and knees. She was trying to get away from the fuel, but she was trapped. The front door was behind Gavin. The back door was locked. She was cornered like a rat in a maze, and the man holding the lighter was the man she had promised to love and obey. Gavin, please, Tasha begged. Her voice was thin and high-pitched. It was the sound of a woman whose reality has shattered. We can fix this. We can just leave. You do not have to do this. Gavin stopped pouring. He stood in the center of the foyer, right under the crystal chandelier Corinne had chosen for our 25th anniversary. He looked at Tasha with eyes that were completely empty. There was no anger anymore. There was only calculation. Fix this, Gavin repeated. He laughed softly. There is no fixing this, Tasha. The money is gone. The house is worthless because your father is playing games. The only value left in this pile of wood is the insurance payout. And frankly, the life insurance payout on you is looking pretty good right now, too. Tasha gasped. She pressed her back against the wall. She looked at him as if he were an alien creature. You want me to die, she whispered. I want to survive, Gavin said simply. If you happen to be in the house when the wiring faults, well, that is just a tragedy. A grieving husband makes a great witness. He raised the lighter. He flicked the wheel. The flame sparked to life, a small orange tongue of fire dancing in the gloom. I am sorry, babe, Gavin said, but you chose the wrong side. You should have found that deed. He lowered the lighter toward the fuel-soaked rug. Upstairs in the bunker, my finger hovered over the master control switch. I had built this system for a nuclear winter. I had built it to keep the world out. But today I was going to use it to keep the devil in. Now I said. I pressed the red button. The reaction was instantaneous. In the house, a series of heavy mechanical thuds echoed like thunder. Hidden steel shutters slammed down over every window in the house, plunging the rooms into darkness. The front door and back door bolts engaged with a deafening metallic clang. The electromagnetic locks on the garage door activated, sealing the exit with 5,000 pounds of force. At the same time, I cut the main power breaker. The lights in the hallway died. The lamp in the study died. The house went pitch black. The only light came from the tiny flickering flame of Gavin's lighter. Gavin froze. He stood there in the darkness, holding his small fire, staring around in confusion. What the hell, he shouted. He ran to the front door. He grabbed the handle and pulled. It did not budge. He threw his shoulder against it. It was like hitting a solid wall of granite. He ran to the window next to the door. He tried to smash the glass with his elbow, but behind the glass was a sheet of rolled steel. He banged on it. Open up, he screamed. Who is doing this? Tasha was sobbing in the dark. I could see her on the infrared camera. She was curled into a ball covering her head. I leaned into the microphone. I turned the volume knob to maximum. My voice traveled through the hardwired speakers hidden in the crown molding of every room. Hello, Gavin. The sound of my voice filled the house. It was loud, deep, and distorted by the amplifier. It sounded like it was coming from the walls themselves. Gavin spun around, waving the lighter wildly. The flame cast jumping shadows on the walls, making the house look alive. Lester Gavin shouted, Is that you? Where are you? I am everywhere, Gavin, I said. I am in the walls. I am in the floor. I am the house. Gavin laughed nervously. It was a high-pitched sound bordering on hysteria. Stop playing games, old man, he yelled. Unlock the doors. You think you can scare me? I have a lighter. I will burn this place down with you in it. Go ahead, I said. Drop the lighter, Gavin. See what happens. He hesitated. He looked down at the gasoline-soaked rug. If you drop that lighter, I continued, the fire suppression system will activate. But it is not water, Gavin. It is halon gas. It sucks the oxygen out of the room to kill the fire. If you light that match, you will suffocate in 30 seconds. It was a lie. I did not have a halon system. But Gavin did not know that. He was a gambler, and I just raised the stakes. He stared at the lighter. His hand was shaking. He flicked it closed. The flame vanished. The house was now in total absolute darkness. I switched on the infrared floodlights. To the naked eye, the room was pitch black. But on my monitors, the house was illuminated in a ghostly green glow. I could see everything. I could see the sweat on his face. I could see the terror in his eyes. You are trapped. Gavin, I said. You wanted my house. Now you have it. You are locked inside with the man you tried to kill. I am going to find you, Gavin screamed into the dark. I am going to find you, and I am going to kill you slowly. He reached into his waistband. On the infrared screen, I saw the metallic glint of a gun. It was a compact 9mm pistol. He had brought a gun to my house. He had come prepared for murder all along. Bang! The muzzle flash lit up the hallway like a strobe light. The sound of the gunshot was deafening in the confined space. He fired blindly into the dark. He shot at the ceiling. He shot at the walls. He was trying to kill the voice. Bang! Bang! Plaster exploded from the wall near the staircase. A vase shattered. Tasha screamed, "Daddy, he has a gun!" "I know, baby," I said, my voice calm over the speakers. "Stay down. Crawl to the kitchen. Get behind the island. He cannot see you." Gavin spun toward Tasha's voice. He raised the gun. "Shut up," he roared. "Shut up or I will shoot you first." He fired again in her direction. The bullet hit the floorboards inches from her foot. My heart stopped for a second. He was shooting at my daughter. The game was over. This was no longer a lesson. This was an execution. I slammed my fist onto the console. "Listen to me, Gavin," I boomed. My voice shook the floorboards. He stopped firing. He was breathing hard, panting like a dog in the dark. "You have made 3 mistakes tonight," I said. My voice was low, cold, and final. It was the voice of a judge pronouncing a death sentence. "Mistake number 1, I said. You thought I was weak because I am old." Gavin spun in a circle trying to locate me. "Show yourself, coward," he screamed. "Mistake number 2, I continued. "You thought this house was just wood and brick. You did not know it was a fortress." Gavin fired again. The bullet struck the steel shutter on the window and ricocheted with a spark. "And mistake number 3, I said, letting the silence hang for a moment. "The biggest mistake of your life." I paused. I watched him trembling in the dark, holding his gun with sweaty hands. "You made my daughter cry." I hit the button for the strobe lights. In the hallway, emergency strobe lights began to flash rapidly. Blinding white pulses of light disoriented him. He covered his eyes, screaming. The strobes were designed to induce nausea and confusion. While he was blinded, I spoke again. "You are in my world now, Gavin. And in my world, we do not call the police. We handle our own trash." I watched him stumble. He dropped the gun. He fell to his knees, grasping for it, but the gun had slid across the floor. "Run, Gavin," I whispered, "because I am coming for you." The strobe lights were doing their job. On the infrared monitor, I watched Gavin stagger down the hallway. He was clutching his head, trying to shield his eyes from the blinding white pulses that flashed 60 times a second. He was disoriented, but he was still dangerous. A man with a gun and nothing to lose is the most dangerous creature on Earth. He was firing blindly now. Bullets tore into the drywall and shattered the family photos lining the corridor. He was trying to kill the house itself. But I had one more surprise for him. When I renovated the ventilation system 10 years ago, I did not just install air conditioning. I installed a localized suppression system. It was designed for fire control, but I had modified the mixture in the tanks. It was not water. Water would damage the hardwood floors. Instead, I used a pressurized dry chemical mixture heavily laced with capsaicin powder. It was essentially pepper spray on an industrial scale designed to fill a room in seconds. I watched Gavin stumble toward the kitchen where Tasha was hiding behind the island. He was getting too close. He was blinking rapidly, trying to clear his vision. "I am sorry about this, Gavin," I whispered to the screen. "This is going to burn." I flipped the toggle switch for the hallway and kitchen zones. A sharp hissing sound erupted from the ceiling nozzles. It sounded like a nest of snakes being unleashed. White clouds of pressurized powder blasted into the air, instantly turning the atmosphere into a thick, choking fog. Gavin walked right into it. The effect was immediate. He dropped to his knees as if he had been shot. The powder coated his skin and entered his eyes and lungs. It burns like fire. It feels like your skin is being peeled off and your throat is closing up. I watched him clawing at his face. He was coughing violently, a deep hacking sound that echoed through the speakers. He tried to scream, but he could not get enough air. He curled into a ball on the floor, rolling back and forth in agony. I felt a grim satisfaction. This was the man who had poisoned my soup. This was the man who had tried to gaslight me into an asylum. Now he knew what it felt like to lose control of his own body. "Tasha," I called out over the intercom, "stay low. Cover your mouth with your shirt. Do not breathe the air. Crawl to the pantry and close the door. The seals on the pantry are airtight." I saw Tasha on the monitor. She was terrified, but she listened. She pulled her sweater up over her nose and crawled on her stomach. She made it to the pantry and pulled the door shut. She was safe for the moment. Gavin was still on the floor, gagging and spitting. He had lost his gun in the confusion. It lay somewhere in the white fog. I thought he was finished. I thought the pain would be enough to make him surrender. I reached for the button to unlock the front door so the police could come in and drag him out. But I underestimated him. Gavin Brock was not just a greedy man. He was a survivor. And like a wounded animal, the pain did not make him quit. It made him feral. He pushed himself up. His face was red and swollen. His eyes were streaming tears, but he forced them open. He looked around wildly. He knew he could not find me. He knew he could not fight the house. So he decided to fight the only thing he could hurt, Tasha. He knew she was in the pantry. He had heard the door close. Gavin let out a roar that did not sound human. He staggered to his feet, wiping the mucus from his face. He looked around for a weapon. He saw the antique fireman's axe I had mounted on the wall near the back door. It was a collector's item, a piece of history from the old city fire department. He grabbed it. He ripped it off the mounting brackets, taking a chunk of plaster with it. He turned toward the pantry. "I come out, old man," he screamed, his voice hoarse and broken. "I come out or I chop her into pieces." He charged at the pantry door. "No," I shouted. He swung the axe. The blade bit deep into the wood of the pantry door. Splinters flew. Tasha screamed from inside. It was a high, terrified shriek that pierced my heart. Gavin swung again, and again. He was fueled by pure adrenaline and hate. He did not care about the burning in his lungs anymore. He only wanted blood. The pantry door was solid oak, but it would not hold forever against a fire axe. I saw the wood splintering. I saw the gap widening. I cannot stop him, I realized. My traps were useless now. The gas, the lights, the locks, they could not stop a man with an axe standing 2 feet away from my daughter. If I stayed in the bunker, Tasha would die. I would watch her die on a high-definition monitor while I sat in safety. I looked at my hands. They were old hands. They were hands that held pens and blueprints, not weapons. I was 68 years old. My knees were bad. My back was stiff. But I was a father. I spun my chair around. Against the back wall of the bunker, locked in a gun cabinet, was my father's old hunting rifle. It was a Winchester lever, action a relic from a different time. I had not fired it in 30 years. I unlocked the cabinet. The metal was cold. I grabbed the box of ammunition. My fingers fumbled as I loaded the rounds. 1, 2, 3. I grabbed the rifle. It felt heavy, heavier than I remembered. I looked at the monitor one last time. Gavin had chopped a hole in the door large enough to stick his arm through. He was reaching in, trying to grab Tasha's hair. "Daddy, help me!" she screamed. "I am coming, baby," I whispered. I turned off the monitors. I did not need to watch anymore. I needed to act. I walked to the ladder. I looked up at the hatch that led to the garden shed. I was leaving the fortress. I was leaving the advantage of the high ground. I was going up there, into the dark, into the gas, into the violence. I climbed the ladder. My heart was pounding so hard I thought it would burst. I was terrified. I was not a hero in a movie. I was an old man with a heart condition and a rusty gun. But as I pushed the hatch open and smelled the night air mixed with the chemical fog leaking from the house, I knew one thing. Only one of us was walking out of this house tonight. I racked the lever of the rifle. The metallic click sounded like justice. I ran toward the back door. The back door flew open with a crash that startled even me. The cold night air rushed in, mixing with the burning chemical fog that filled the kitchen. I stood there, framed in the doorway, holding my father's Winchester rifle. My hands were slick with sweat, and my heart was hammering a rhythm that felt dangerous for a man of my age. I leveled the barrel at the figure in the hallway. Gavin turned. He was a monster emerging from the mist. His face was red and swollen from the pepper powder, his eyes streaming tears but filled with a murderous rage that defied pain. He held the fireman's axe in his hands, the blade chipped from hacking at the pantry door. "Get away from her!" I shouted, my voice cracked. I was not a soldier. I was a building inspector. I was used to fighting with code violations and blueprints, not with leverage action rifles. Gavin did not freeze. He did not put his hands up. He laughed. It was a wet, gurgling sound. "You finally came out of your hole," he sneered. He took a step toward me. I pulled the trigger. The recoil kicked hard against my shoulder, bruising the old bone. The gun roared in the confined space, but my aim was true. The bullet struck the handle of the axe, shattering the wood near his grip. The force of the impact tore the weapon from his hands and sent it skittering across the floor into the darkness. Gavin howled in pain, clutching his hand. Splinters had embedded themselves in his palm. But he did not stop. He was fueled by a desperate adrenaline that masked all injury. He lowered his shoulder and charged me like a linebacker. I tried to rack the lever for a second shot, but my fingers were too slow. He was on me in a heartbeat. He slammed into me with the force of a freight train. The air left my lungs in a whoosh. We crashed backward through the kitchen doorway, knocking over the table and sending chairs flying. The rifle clattered out of my hands and slid under the refrigerator. We hit the floor hard. My head bounced off the linoleum and stars exploded in my vision. For a moment, the world went black. When my sight cleared, Gavin was on top of me. He was heavy, a solid 200 pounds of youth and muscle. I tried to buck him off, but it was like trying to move a boulder. I was 68 years old. I had knowledge and wisdom, but in a street fight, gravity and youth are the only laws that matter. "You old fool," Gavin screamed. He punched me in the face. I felt my lips split. I tasted blood, warm and metallic. I reached up and clawed at his face. I went for his eyes. It was a dirty move, but I was fighting for my life. My thumb found his eye socket, and I pressed down with every ounce of strength I had left. Gavin shrieked and reared back. It gave me a second. Just 1 second. I rolled to the side, gasping for air. I tried to scramble to my feet. I grabbed the edge of the counter to pull myself up. My legs felt like rubber. My chest was burning. Gavin recovered faster than I did. He grabbed my ankle and yanked. I fell forward, my chin hitting the granite countertop. Pain shot through my jaw. He dragged me back into the center of the kitchen. He flipped me over. He straddled my chest, pinning my arms with his knees. He looked down at me. His face was a mask of blood and mucus and hatred. One of his eyes was swollen shut from my thumb, but the other was wide and manic. "You should have just died," he panted. "You should have just signed the papers and died. Why do you have to be so difficult?" He wrapped his hands around my throat. His grip was iron. I tried to pull his hands away, but my strength was failing. The oxygen to my brain was cut off. The edges of my vision began to turn gray. I looked up at him. I saw the man I had welcomed into my family. I saw the man I had toasted at his wedding. I saw the man who was killing me. I tried to speak. I tried to say Tasha's name, but only a gurgle came out. Gavin squeezed harder. He was enjoying it. "Die," he whispered. "Just die." I stopped fighting. My arms fell to my sides. My lungs burned. The grayness was closing in, turning into a long, dark tunnel. I thought about Corinne. I thought about the house. I thought about how I had failed to protect it. Gavin smiled. He felt my resistance fade. He leaned in close, his breath smelling of expensive scotch and fear. "Good night, Dad," he mocked. Suddenly there was a noise, a loud wooden crack that sounded like a bat hitting a fastball. Gavin's head snapped to the side violently. His eyes rolled back in his head. His grip on my throat loosened instantly. He slumped to the side, falling off my chest like a sack of potatoes. I gasped, sucking in air that tasted like heaven and fire. I coughed violently, clutching my bruised throat. I looked up. Standing over us was Tasha. She was trembling from head to toe. In her hands, she held my old Louisville Slugger baseball bat, the one I kept by the back door for security. She held it like a weapon, her knuckles white. She was covered in dust from the pantry. Her face was streaked with tears. But her eyes were clear. The fog of manipulation had finally lifted. She looked at the man lying on the floor, the man she had married, and she saw him for what he was. "Get away from him," Tasha screamed. "Get away from my father." She raised the bat again, ready to strike if he moved. "Tasha," I rasped. My voice was a broken whisper. "Run. Get out." Gavin groaned. He rolled onto his back. Blood was trickling from his ear. Tasha had hit him hard enough to concuss him, but not hard enough to keep him down. He blinked his eyes, focusing on the ceiling, then on Tasha. He sat up slowly. He touched his head and looked at the blood on his fingers. "You hit me," he said. He sounded surprised, like a child who had been scolded. "I said get out," Tasha yelled. She swung the bat at him again, a warning shot that whizzed past his nose. Gavin's expression changed. The shock vanished, replaced by a cold, deadly fury. He looked at the bat and then he looked at Tasha. "You stupid bitch," he snarled. He moved faster than I thought possible for a man who had just been clubbed. He lunged forward, ducking under the swing of the bat. He tackled Tasha around the waist. "No," I screamed. I tried to get up, but my legs would not obey me. I crawled toward them. Tasha fell backward, dropping the bat. Gavin did not just subdue her, he punished her. He stood over her and drove his fist into her face. It was a sound that will haunt me until my dying day. The sound of a man hitting a woman. The sound of a husband destroying his wife. Tasha's head snapped back and hit the hardwood floor with a sickening thud. She went limp instantly. Her eyes closed. She lay there sprawled on the kitchen floor, motionless. Gavin stood over her, breathing heavily. He wiped the blood from his ear. He looked down at her unconscious body with zero remorse. He looked at her like she was a broken appliance. "That is what you get," he spat. He turned to look at me. I was on my hands and knees 10 feet away. I was weeping. I was crying for my daughter. Now he said, walking toward me, "Where were we?" He bent down and picked up the baseball bat. He weighed it in his hands. "I am going to finish this," he said. "Then I am going to burn this house down with both of you in it. No witnesses, just a tragic family fire." He raised the bat. I looked him in the eye. I did not beg. I did not look away. "Do it," I whispered. He tensed his muscles to swing, and then the room was flooded with blue and red light. The sound of sirens cut through the night air, loud and piercing. Not one siren. Many. They were right outside in the driveway. Gavin froze. The bat hovered in the air. "Police open up," came a voice from a megaphone outside. "We have the house surrounded. Come out with your hands up." Gavin looked at the window. The steel shutters were down, but the blue lights flashed through the cracks. He looked at the bat. He looked at me. He looked at Tasha lying still on the floor. Panic flooded his face. The reality of his situation crashed down on him. He was not a mastermind. He was not a victor. He was a man standing in a gas-filled room with 2 bodies and a weapon while the entire police force waited outside. He dropped the bat. It clattered loudly on the floor. He ran to the back door. Locked. He ran to the front door. Locked. He was trapped in the cage I had built. I looked at him and smiled through my bloody teeth. "I told you, Gavin," I whispered. "Welcome to hell." The front door did not open. It disintegrated. The battering ram hit the deadbolt with the force of a hydraulic press, and the wood frame I had reinforced myself 20 years ago finally gave way. Splinters flew through the air like shrapnel. A team of tactical officers poured into the hallway screaming commands that overlapped into a wall of noise. "Drop the weapon. Get on the ground. Hands where I can see them." The blue strobe lights from their rifles cut through the lingering chemical fog, creating a strobe effect that made everything look like a stop-motion nightmare. I was on my knees, gasping for air, my face swollen and bloody. Tasha was lying motionless a few feet away, and Gavin Brock was putting on the performance of his life. The moment the door splintered, Gavin dropped to his knees beside Tasha. He grabbed her hand and pressed it to his cheek, wailing loud enough to be heard over the shouting police officers. "Help us!" he screamed. "Oh God, please help us! He is crazy. He killed her. He tried to kill us both." He pointed a shaking finger at me. His face was a mask of terror, but behind the tears I saw the cold calculation. He knew exactly what he was doing. To the officers bursting in from the cold night air, the scene looked exactly like what Gavin described. There was a young couple cowering on the floor. There was an old man with a wild look in his eyes, surrounded by the wreckage of a violent struggle. There was the smell of gasoline and pepper spray. The lead officer, a large man in full body armor, saw me. He saw the way I was looking at Gavin. He saw the rage that was still burning in my chest. He did not see a victim. He saw a threat. He leveled his rifle at my chest. The laser sight danced on my shirt, right over my heart. "Do not move," he shouted. "Sir, put your hands behind your head and interlace your fingers. Do it now." "Officer, he has a gun," Gavin sobbed. "He hid it somewhere. He poisoned my wife. Look at her. She is not waking up. Please do not let him hurt us anymore." "You are lying," I croaked. My voice was weak, damaged from the strangulation. "He did it. He hit her." "Shut up," the officer barked. "I said hands on your head." Gavin looked at me. For a split second, he broke character. He smiled. It was a tiny, imperceptible twitch of his lips. He thought he had done it. He thought he had flipped the board. If I moved, if I reached for my pocket, if I did anything other than surrender, I would be dead before my body hit the floor. And dead men cannot testify. Dead men cannot explain about safe decoys or hidden cameras. I slowly raised my hands. My shoulders screamed in protest. I laced my fingers behind my head. "Turn around," the officer commanded. "Face away from me." I did not turn around. I could not turn around. If I turned my back on Gavin, he would find a way to finish what he started. He would grab a piece of glass. He would grab the officer's gun in the confusion. I had to keep my eyes on the wolf. I said, "Turn around," the officer shouted, stepping closer. I stayed still. The tension in the room was thick enough to choke on. I was an inch away from being shot in my own kitchen. The officer took another step. His finger tightened on the trigger. I could see the tension in his forearms. He was young. He was scared. He smelled the gas. He saw the bodies. He wanted to go home alive, and right now I was the only thing standing in his way. "Sir, this is your last warning," the officer said. His voice was shaking slightly. Gavin buried his face in Tasha's neck, pretending to check for a pulse. "He is going to snap," Gavin shouted, muffled by Tasha's hair. "Shoot him. Before he hurts anyone else, just shoot him." It was the perfect trap. Gavin had used the legal system to try and steal my house. Now he was using the police force to try and steal my life. He was weaponizing the very people I had called for help. I looked at the officer. I looked at his name tag. Miller. "Officer Miller," I said. My voice was calm. Unnaturally calm for a man facing execution. "Do not speak," Miller yelled. "I am not moving my hands," I said, speaking slowly and clearly. "I am compliant. But you are making a mistake. He is manipulating you," Gavin screamed. "Do not listen to him. He has dementia. He does not know what he is saying." I kept my eyes locked on Miller. I did not blink. "Officer Miller, look at the floor," I said. "Look at the drag marks." Miller's eyes flicked down for a fraction of a second. "Now look at his hands," I continued. "Look at the splinters in his palm. Look at the bruises on his knuckles." "Shut up," Gavin roared. He stood up, abandoning his fake grief. "Officer, arrest him. Why are you talking to him? Stay down," the officer shouted at Gavin, swinging his rifle toward him for a second. Gavin froze. He realized he had moved too fast. He sank back down. I took a deep breath. My ribs ached. My head throbbed, but my mind was sharp. The adrenaline was fading, and in its place was the cold, hard logic of the inspector. "You can arrest me, Officer Miller," I said. "You can put me in handcuffs. You can even shoot me if you think that is what the situation requires." I paused. The room was silent except for the sound of the wind whistling through the broken front door. "But before you pull that trigger," I said, "I want you to look up." I slowly unlaced one finger and pointed toward the ceiling corner above the refrigerator. Miller looked up. In the shadows, hidden among the crown molding, a tiny red light was blinking, steady and rhythmic. "What is that?" Miller asked. That, I said, is a high-definition, wide-angle lens connected to a closed-circuit server. Gavin went pale. He stopped crying. He stopped moving. "And it is not just recording," I said. My voice grew stronger. "It is transmitting." I looked at Gavin. I saw the blood drain from his face. I saw the terror replace the arrogance. "Every word you said tonight, Gavin. Every threat, the gasoline, the axe, the punch that knocked my daughter unconscious. It was all uploaded in real time." I turned my gaze back to Officer Miller. "I sent the link to the personal email of Police Chief Henderson 5 minutes before you arrived. I also sent it to my lawyer and the state prosecutor's office." I lowered my hand. "So go ahead," I said. "You can shoot me. You can write it up as self-defense. But 10 minutes from now, the chief is going to open his email, and he is going to see you kill an unarmed man who was protecting his daughter from a monster." The silence that followed was absolute. Miller lowered his rifle slightly. He looked at the camera. He looked at the gas can in the hallway. He looked at Tasha's bruised face. He looked at Gavin. Gavin stood up slowly. He looked like a man waking up from a dream to find himself in a nightmare. "That is a lie," Gavin stammered. "He is bluffing. There are no cameras. He is senile." Miller did not look at me this time. He looked at Gavin, and for the first time I saw the suspicion in his eyes. Sir Miller said to Gavin, "Step away from the woman." "No, you do not understand," Gavin said, his voice rising in panic. "He set this up. He is framing me. I said step away," Miller barked. He raised his rifle again, but this time it was pointed at Gavin. Gavin took a step back. He looked at the back door. He looked at the window. "Do not even think about it," I said. Gavin looked at me. His eyes were full of hate, but beneath the hate was something else. "Defeat, you old bastard," he whispered. I smiled. It was a smile of blood and bruise, but it was the most genuine smile of my life. "Smile for the camera, Gavin," I said. "You are the star of the show." Officer Miller did not hesitate. He grabbed Gavin by the lapels of his expensive Italian suit and spun him around. The movement was violent and necessary. Gavin hit the floor face first with a thud that vibrated through the hardwood. "You have the right to remain silent," Miller shouted, pressing his knee into the small of Gavin's back. Gavin struggled. He kicked his legs and screamed into the floorboards. "I am the victim here. You are arresting the wrong man. He is crazy. He has cameras." Miller pulled Gavin's arms behind his back. The metallic ratcheting sound of the handcuffs tightening was the sweetest music I had ever heard. It was the sound of justice catching up to a man who thought he could outrun it. I stood there leaning against the counter, struggling to catch my breath. My throat felt like it had been filled with broken glass. My face was throbbing. But I watched every second. I wanted to burn this image into my memory. The wolf was finally in chains. Miller hauled Gavin to his feet. Gavin looked wild. His hair was plastered to his forehead with sweat and pepper spray residue. His eyes darted around the room looking for an escape that did not exist. "Search him," I rasped. My voice was a whisper, but Miller heard me. "Check his jacket pocket." Miller reached into Gavin's left pocket. He pulled out a silver Zippo lighter. He flicked the lid open and closed. It clinked softly in the sudden silence of the room. "Arson," Miller said, looking at Gavin with disgust. "You were going to light it up with them inside." "It was self-defense," Gavin spat. "The old man attacked me." Miller reached into the inside breast pocket of the jacket. He pulled out a folded document. It was thick. The paper was crisp and white. Miller unfolded it. He read the header out loud. "Universal Life and Casualty. Term, life insurance policy. Insured Tasha Freeman Brock. Beneficiary, Gavin Brock. Date of effect yesterday." Miller looked at Gavin. The disgust on his face turned into cold fury. "You bought a policy on your wife yesterday," Miller said. "And today you are standing in a house soaked in gasoline." Gavin went pale. He opened his mouth to speak, but no words came out. The evidence was physical. It was undeniable. It was in his pocket. "Get him out of here," Miller told his partner. Two other officers grabbed Gavin by the arms. They dragged him toward the shattered front door. Gavin did not walk with dignity. He dragged his feet. He looked back at me one last time. "You ruined everything," he screamed at me. "You old ruin. You should have just died." I did not say a word. I just watched him disappear into the night, surrounded by the flashing blue lights. Paramedics rushed into the kitchen. They swarmed over Tasha. One of them approached me, reaching for my arm. "Sir, you need to sit down," the medic said. "Your face is badly swollen and you are showing signs of respiratory distress. We need to get you to the hospital immediately." I pulled my arm away. "Check my daughter," I said, pointing at Tasha. "Check her first." "Sir, she is being attended to. You need care." "I am not going anywhere," I said firmly. I walked over to where Tasha lay. A medic was placing a neck brace on her. Another was shining a light into her eyes. "She is coming around," the medic said. Tasha groaned. It was a low, painful sound that cut through the noise of the sirens and the crackle of police radios. Her eyes fluttered open. She looked confused. She looked at the ceiling, then at the medics, then at me. "Daddy," she whispered. Her voice was weak. "I am here, baby," I said. I knelt down beside her, ignoring the screaming pain in my own knees. I took her hand. It was cold. "Where is he?" she asked. Her eyes were wide with panic. "Where is Gavin?" "He is gone," I said. "The police took him. He can never hurt you again." Tasha closed her eyes. A tear leaked out and ran down her cheek, mixing with the dust and blood. "He hit me," she said softly. "He really hit me." "We are going to move her now," the medic said. "We need to get her to St. Mary's for a CT scan to rule out a brain bleed." I stood up. I followed the stretcher as they wheeled her out of the house. The cool night air hit my face. My front yard was a circus. There were 6 police cars, an ambulance, and a fire truck. The neighbors were all out standing on their lawns in their bathrobes, pointing and whispering. "Sir," the medic said, opening the back doors of the ambulance. "You cannot ride with her. You need your own ambulance. You have serious injuries." I looked at him. I straightened my back. I was battered. I was bruised. My lip was split and my eye was swelling shut. But I was the father, and a father does not ride in a separate car when his child is bleeding. "I am riding with her," I said. My voice brooked no argument. "I am not leaving her side. If you want to treat me, you can treat me in there." The medic looked at me. He saw the resolve in my one good eye. He nodded. "Get in," he said. I climbed into the back of the ambulance. I sat on the bench seat next to the stretcher. I took Tasha's hand again. The doors slammed shut, sealing us in a box of white light and antiseptic smell. The siren wailed as we pulled away. I watched the vitals monitor beeping steadily. Tasha was stable. She was broken, but she was alive. I looked at my own hands. They were trembling now that the adrenaline was fading. I had almost killed a man tonight. I had almost lost my daughter. I had turned my home into a war zone. But as I looked at Tasha sleeping fitfully under the sedation, I knew I would do it all again. I would burn the whole world down to keep her safe. Suddenly the ambulance slowed down. The radio in the front crackled. "Dispatch to Unit 4. Officer Miller is requesting a stop. He has evidence that the family needs to see immediately. The ambulance pulled over to the side of the road. The back doors opened. Officer Miller stood there. He looked grim. He was holding a clear plastic evidence bag. "I am sorry to interrupt," Miller said, "but we just searched Gavin's car. It was parked 2 blocks away." I looked at the bag. Inside was a blue booklet, a passport. But it was not Gavin's passport. The photo was Gavin, but the name read Alexander Vance. "It is a fake," Miller said. "High-quality forgery." And there was something else in the bag. A printed airline ticket. "One way to Belize," Miller said. "Departing tomorrow morning at 6 a.m. I felt a cold chill that had nothing to do with the temperature. "He was leaving," I whispered. Miller nodded. He packed a bag, cash, gold coins, and this passport. He was never going to pay off the loan sharks. He was never going to start a new life with your daughter. I looked at Tasha. She was still asleep, thank God. She did not hear this final betrayal. "He was going to burn the house down to cover his tracks," Miller said softly. "He was going to kill both of you so there would be no witnesses to his disappearance. He wanted the insurance money wired to an offshore account and he was going to vanish. He did not just want to rob us," I said. My voice shook with rage. "He wanted to erase us." "He did not care about her," Miller said. "She was just a loose end to him." I looked at the ticket again. 6 a.m. If I had not fought back, if I had signed those papers, if I had stayed in that bunker, Tasha would be ashes right now and Gavin would be sipping a drink on a beach under a new name. "Thank you, officer," I said. Miller nodded. "We have him on everything. Attempted murder, arson, fraud, forgery, identity theft. He is going away for the rest of his life, Mr. Freeman. You made sure of that." The doors closed again. The ambulance merged back into traffic. I squeezed Tasha's hand. "You are free, baby," I whispered. "It cost us the house. It cost us our innocence. But you are free." And for the first time in months, I breathed easily. The wolf was in a cage, and the sheep was safe. The shepherd was tired, but the shepherd had won. It took 30 days to get the smell of gasoline out of the curtains. The contractors worked fast, replacing the front door and the shattered drywall in the hallway. They painted over the bullet holes and sanded down the scratches on the hardwood floor where the struggle had taken place. My house looks new again. To a stranger walking past on the street, it looks like the perfect picture of suburban tranquility. But those of us who live inside know that the walls hold memories that fresh paint can never cover. My wife Corinne returned from Atlanta 2 days after the arrest. I was terrified to tell her. I thought she would blame me for endangering our daughter. I thought she would scream. But Corinne is a woman of formidable strength. She walked into the hospital room where Tasha and I were recovering. She looked at Tasha's neck brace. She looked at my swollen eye, and she simply opened her arms. She held us both for an hour without saying a word. Her silence was the mortar that began to put our family back together. Tasha is living with us now. She filed for divorce the morning she was discharged from the hospital. There was no hesitation this time, no tears for the man she had married. The illusion was shattered completely. She is seeing a therapist to deal with the trauma and the guilt. She still wakes up screaming, sometimes thinking she is trapped in the pantry. But every day she gets a little stronger. Yesterday she laughed at a joke I made. It was a small, fragile sound, but to me it sounded like a symphony. We were sitting in the kitchen drinking coffee when I decided it was time. Tasha was staring at the spot on the floor where Gavin had hit her. I could see the shadow of fear still lingering in her eyes. She felt foolish. She felt like she had been blind. I needed to show her that she was not the only one who had secrets. "Come with me, Tasha," I said, putting down my mug. I led her out to the garage. It was cluttered with boxes and tools, the typical domain of a retired man. I walked over to the oil stain on the concrete floor near the back wall. It looked like a permanent blemish from an old car leak. "Help me move this workbench," I said. Tasha looked confused, but she grabbed one end. We slid the heavy bench aside. I knelt down and pulled a small pry bar from my pocket. I wedged it into a crack in the concrete that was almost invisible to the naked eye. I applied pressure. A square section of the floor popped up. It was a false bottom, a heavy concrete lid disguised to match the floor perfectly. Underneath was a steel box. Tasha gasped. "Is that money, Dad? Is that what Gavin was looking for?" I shook my head. I reached in and pulled out a thick waterproof envelope. I handed it to her. "Open it," I said. Tasha opened the envelope. Inside there was no cash. There were no diamonds. There were stacks of printed emails, bank transfer logs, and grainy photographs of Gavin meeting with men in dark suits. "What is this?" she asked, flipping through the pages. "That is insurance," I said. "I have known for 6 months that Gavin was washing money for the cartel. I tracked his accounts. I hired a private investigator to follow him. I documented every illegal transaction he made through his shell companies." Tasha looked up at me, her eyes wide. "You knew. Why didn't you go to the police sooner?" "Because I needed you to see him," I said softly. "If I had gone to the police 6 months ago, you would have hated me. You would have defended him. You would have used your own money to bail him out. You were in love with a mask, Tasha." I had to wait until the mask slipped. I took the papers from her hand. "I was keeping this as a nuclear option," I explained. "If he had managed to get the guardianship, if he had managed to put me away." I instructed my lawyer to release this file to the FBI immediately. He was never going to win Tasha. Even if I died, he was going to prison. Tasha looked at the papers and then at me. She realized then that her father was not a helpless old man. I was a fortress that had been protecting her from the shadows all along. "You saved me," she whispered. "You risked your life to save me from my own mistake." I hugged her. We stood in the garage, surrounded by the smell of motor oil and dust, holding on to each other. The ghost of Gavin Brock was gone, exorcised by the truth. That afternoon, I made one last phone call. I invited Rosa over. When she arrived, she looked nervous. She stood in the foyer, wringing her hands, looking at the new front door. "Mr. Freeman," she said, "I am so sorry about everything. I should have called sooner." "Rosa," I said, interrupting her, "you called at the exact right moment. If you had not made that call, I would have come home to an empty safe and a missing deed. You gave me the warning I needed to prepare." I handed her an envelope. It was not thick, but it was heavy with gratitude. Inside was a check for $50,000. It was a significant portion of my savings, but it was a small price to pay for my life. "This is for your son's college fund," I said, "and for your loyalty." Rosa started to cry. She tried to give it back, but I closed her hands around it. "Take it," I said. "Honest people are rare, Rosa. We have to look out for each other." That evening we sat down to dinner. The table was set with Corinne's best china. The roast chicken smelled delicious, filling the house with warmth. It was just the three of us. Corinne sat at one end, Tasha at the side, and I took my place at the head of the table. There was no tension. There were no secrets. The empty chair where Gavin used to sit had been removed. The space felt open and light. I looked at my family. I looked at the walls of the house I had built. I realized that the true foundation of this home was not concrete or steel. It was the refusal to break under pressure. It was the courage to face the ugly truth and the strength to rebuild after the fire. I raised my glass. "To family," I said. "The real one." Tasha smiled. It was a real smile this time. "To family," she repeated. "I am Lester Freeman, and I learned that sometimes you have to let the wolf into your house to trap him. But more importantly, I learned that as long as you have people worth fighting for, you are never too old to win the war. What would you have done in my position? Would you have signed the papers, or would you have fought back? Let me know in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this story, please hit that like button and subscribe. It helps me share more stories of justice and survival. Until next time, protect your home and trust your instincts. This experience taught me that evil does not always look like a monster. Sometimes it wears a smile and calls you dad. I learned that trust is a luxury you cannot afford when your gut tells you something is wrong. Protecting your family does not always mean saying yes. It sometimes means having the courage to say no and to fight back when they are being used against you. We often think of home as a safe haven, but safety is something you must actively maintain. Do not underestimate the quiet observation of an old man, because wisdom is the most dangerous weapon of all. If you enjoyed this story of justice and survival, please hit the like button and subscribe to the channel for more. Share this with someone who needs to be reminded of their own strength. Let me know in the comments if you would have forgiven Tasha or if you would have walked away. Until next time, stay safe and keep your eyes open.